Around the world, Terminator 2 earned almost $500 million.
True Lies is true gold, playing the #1 spot.
Blows everything else out of the water, absolutely.
When I walked out of the Terminator, at the end, mind you, I was thoroughly entertained.
Stanley Kubrick, George Lucas, James Cameron.
You better start moving and feel the music. Get your groove on and let it use you. When you feel the fire and you know it's right, pure desire, just hold on tight. Get up, down, move around, get down on the ground, get high and touch the sky. You know the reasons why. Just dance. Come on, just dance. Just dance. And fly a little higher.
It was 1954. It was here in Capus Casing that Shirley and Philip Cameron welcomed their firstborn, James Francis.
Growing up in Canada, his passions were movies, art, and science. After the family moved to California in his late teens, he spent some aimless years, dropping out of junior college, working as a machinist and a bus mechanic.
And then one day I just quit my job and started making a film, making a short film.
Star Wars, 1 billion years in the making, and it's coming to your galaxy this summer.
In 1977, Star Wars swept half of America off of its feet. 23-year-old Cameron was no exception. Deeply impressed by George Lucas and his team, along with some college buddies, he planned to shoot their own space epic, Xenogenesis. Opportunity knocked when a friend's dad, an accountant for a dentist association looking to invest, invited them to pitch to his client.
They made him a machine, trained to deliver humanity from the final cataclysm.
When James pitched his space epic to a group, they saw dollar signs and quickly wrote a check for $30,000. They didn't understand that we were so far out of the orbit of any normal filmmaking environment that a grip on the cheesiest film knew more than we did. Cameron made up for his lack of experience with a hefty dose of determination. They secured an industrial area near the Orange County Airport as their shooting location. And rather than attending formal courses, they used a pile of film books from the local library to master set design and special effects. Armed with just utility knives and cardboard, they dove into creating new worlds. When it came time to rent a camera, they needed a quick tutorial on how to load the film. Despite the overwhelming odds, the team managed to pull off some seriously impressive tricks. They nailed it with miniatures and composite shots, animating laser beams frame by frame, and they really excelled with robots. Cameron would later draw on these early creations for the tech in Aliens and the Terminator. Considering that Xenogenesis was made by, to put it mildly, amateurs is truly remarkable. However, they only managed to shoot about 12 minutes of it, not exactly a full feature film. No surprise the dentists were ticked off. They were hoping for a blockbuster, not just a portfolio piece. But Cameron? He was clever with it. He took that short reel over to Roger Corman's office, who, you won't believe this, was about to shoot the next Star Wars on a shoestring, or rather, a knockoff titled
Battle Beyond the Stars.
New World has had several profitable years, and we're now starting to make more expensive films, and we're climbing once more.
Corman was a filmmaking factory. He cranked out over 400 films, always sticking to his cheap and quick mantra. This approach and his love for shoestring budgets had attracted budding filmmakers for decades. Titans like Nicholson, Bogdanovich, Coppola, and Scorsese all started under Roger's tutelage, but lately, big studios had been cribbing his style. They bet on young directors and tiny budgets, hoping to strike gold with a new Spielberg. To stay competitive, Corman set his sights on his magnum opus, a remake of Kurosawa's Seven Samurai in space with a $2 million budget.
Ruthless invaders, a defenseless planet. A lone youth escapes on a last-ditch mission that begins at the edge of the universe.
Pretty impressive.
He even set up a special effects department in his studio for this beast. And the new director of that department brought Cameron on board as a model and miniature designer. When Jim got to work, all the spaceship designs were ready except one, the ship piloted by a female robot.
This isn't going to be just another planetary joyride, you know.
I know that, Nell. I'll do my best not to let you down.
It was this design he was hammering out when Gail Ann Hurd, Corman's young assistant, who would later become Cameron's wife and filmmaking partner, walked into the workshop.
She spent about 3 or 4 days there, came back, and she said, "You're falling behind in special effects, and the problem is your top special effects people are not really that good. The youngest, newest guy in special effects is actually the best." That was Jim Cameron, and I said, "Promote Jim today."
From there, Cameron's career shot up like a rocket. After impressing Roger with his concept for a spaceship with tits,
See what I mean?
he got bumped up to head of ship design. Just weeks later, Corman fired the film's art director, who hadn't produced a single sketch in a month. Cameron stepped in with his own designs that day and snagged the spot. Jim learned fast that Corman's method tolerated no delays. If the crew was on set, you were shooting, no matter if things weren't quite painted or the floor was still a mess.
Move it! Kick ass, boys! Kick ass!
After the chaos, which Corman proudly called a film shoot, wrapped, Cameron went off to apply his newfound skills everywhere he could. He helped design skyscrapers for Carpenter's Escape from New York and moved on to another Corman project,
Galaxy of Terror.
Or as it should really be called, a cheap ripoff of Alien.
It's been waiting 1 billion years to scare you to death. Trapped in a living maze of terror. The ultimate horror in space.
Cameron was tasked with mimicking H.R. Geiger's iconic design on a budget barely bigger than Geiger's daily coffee tab. It was a tough job, and the results didn't exactly wow Roger. Corman grew frustrated with the director and his team, who seemed to shoot the sets in the worst ways possible. The decorator pointed this out to Corman and suggested shooting the close-ups himself.
And I just basically went up to Roger one day and said I'd like to direct second unit. And he gave me a camera and 2 or 3 people, and we started a little second unit. And the second unit basically became this steamroller that wound up shooting about 1/3 of the picture. And I had to do this scene where this guy's gotten his arm chopped off and there's like maggots on the arm. Right. But they don't really use maggots, they use mealworms. And the mealworms aren't doing anything. So I took a piece of zip cord, electrical cord, and put it underneath the arm and buried it so you couldn't see it. Right. And there's a guy behind the set. When I say action, he plugs in the electrical cord. I go, okay, roll camera, and action. All these worms come to life, start wiggling around. I say, okay, cut. The guy behind the set unplugs the thing, the worms stop moving.
It was during this spectacle that the producers of Piranha II, who were originally scouting for a production designer, stumbled upon a director who could make even worms act.
I look up and there's these 2 guys looking at each other with amazement. And they're like, hey, you want to go to lunch, kid?
Did you miss out on the Piranha sequel? Don't sweat it. Let's give you a quick refresher. 2 diving enthusiasts become a snack for a mysterious creature. A local biologist and diving instructor try to warn the hotel guest and the administration of the annual fishing contest about the lurking monster.
Piranha.
But the allure of the warm Caribbean Sea and the thrill of casting a line are too tempting to resist. The biologist figures out that the culprits are genetically modified piranhas,
The ultimate killer organism.
and now not only shrug off saltwater, but have sprouted wings to boot. Flying bloodthirsty fish. Well, you can guess what happens next, even if you're not a big slasher fan. To get why Cameron got sucked into this mess of silliness and gore, let's first meet Ovidio Assanitis, the notorious Italian producer. Back in '77, he directed the horror flick Tentacles, and 3 years later, he pretty much ripped off The Omen with this movie, The Visitor.
Can I scare you?
Warner Brothers, the American investors, would only fork over the cash if Ovidio agreed to hire an American director. They figured this would balance out the flamboyant European producer and ensure the film appealed to U.S. audiences.
I can't figure out why I came to a small island for my vacation. I mean, I live on a small island. Oh, really? Which one? Manhattan.
Assanitis would agree, bring on an inexpensive newbie, let them get through the pre-production, and then a couple of days into shooting, he'd fire them for incompetence and finish the film himself.
Oh, Christ.
This trick worked twice before, so for Piranha, which was funded with $500,000, they found their third sucker, James Cameron.
He put me with an Italian crew who spoke no English, even though I was assured that they would all speak English. And I actually had to learn some Italian very quickly.
Naive and thrilled about the chance to direct his own film, James jetted off to Rome. He signed the contract, pocketed $5,000 in advance, worked on the script and storyboards, then flew out to Jamaica where Ovidio's team was supposed to be gearing up to shoot. But he found their prep was laughably slack. With only a week to go, they hadn't scouted a single location. Cameron hired a taxi and spent a whole day racing around the city, making deals with a hotel, police station, and the local morgue.
Hey, this is the morgue. Very good.
But there was a hitch at the morgue. James assumed they'd clear out the, let's say, occupants, but the staff left everything as it was. So the scene was literally separated from realism by a thin divider behind which lay real gore. During the crew's lunch break, pathologists took one body splashing blood on the floor. Cameron asked the actors to hang tight and, not wanting to freak out his crew, cleaned up the mess himself.
No damn respect. Isn't that right, love?
Amidst the chaos, though, you could see glimmers of the filmmaker Cameron would become. If you squint hard, you could spot elements reminiscent of Aliens and The Abyss, techniques that would later animate facehuggers, Cameron's fascination with water, and even a familiar face. Lance Henriksen, who played the sheriff, struck up a friendship with James between takes and would soon receive more than one casting call from him.
It must be something we haven't seen yet.
But back then, Cameron, being a director, was as far-fetched as Piranha matching Jaws in acclaim. Just 5 days after filming started, he got a call from Rome. He was fired. Ovidio had reviewed the footage and declared it uneditable.
Well, now what else could it be, huh?
Realizing he'd been conned, Cameron demanded his name be removed from the credits. But the name was the only thing the producer wanted from him, so the ex-director got the cold shoulder.
He basically came in and said, your stuff doesn't work, doesn't cut together, it's a pile of junk, and you're off the movie. And then he took over the film.
So I took over, and I asked him to stay next to me up to the end of the movie and to learn. And he did it.
I mean, okay, maybe I'm just bad. Maybe I'm just not good.
And of course he was very upset about it. He was suffering a lot. But, we are not playing games. No. We're making movies. Or we're not at school.
Half a year later, Cameron scraped together enough to buy a one-way ticket to Rome. His mission? To convince Ovidio to show him the final cut of the film they'd snatched away. If his scenes were really that bad, he could stop torturing himself with doubt and peacefully return to designing spaceships with tits.
And he wouldn't show me any of the film. And I had been in Rome prepping the film for a couple of weeks before we went, and I remembered the code to get in. And so I went in and I just ran the film for myself. It wasn't that bad.
His scenes were just as good as he'd imagined. It was Asanidi's creativity that had tanked the film, stuffing the reel with topless women on yachts and giving them the lion's share of screen time.
Sounds great.
Imagine having your name forever linked to such a nightmare. Worse than anything, the film's characters endured.
And I made a few changes, before I flew back, which I don't know if they ever caught. I don't know if the editor ever noticed that I actually fixed a couple things.
Sneaking into the editing room at night, he spent a month in Rome doing this, surviving on leftovers he swiped from trays outside hotel rooms. There he also suffered one of the worst fevers of his life.
I was sick with a high fever. I had a dream of this chrome metallic death figure coming out of a fire, kind of a skeletal robot, if you will. So I woke up with that image in mind, did some drawings.
This is fucking great.
Cameron's efforts to save the edit were in vain. Ovidio Asenita showed his cut of the film to Warner Brothers, who were horrified and promptly rejected it. The film would eventually surface 2 years later, released by a small outfit mainly known for churning out adult films. Decades later, Cameron would half-jokingly call Piranha's
very best flying piranha movie ever made.
And perfect for cracking open a cold one.
It's a gift from the sea.
But back in the spring of 1982, laughter was the last thing on his mind. Strapped for cash, he borrowed some money for a plane ticket and headed back to California, armed with a sketch of an original idea inspired by a bout with the flu. Fresh off the plane from Europe and drowning in debt, Cameron drove an old beater handed down by his father to Bill Wisher's place.
Jim and I met in the early 73, I think, and there weren't that many people in the town who were interested in, science fiction and all that kind of stuff.
After countless hours spent watching movies together and dissecting them afterward, they teamed up to work on Xenogenesis.
We saw before.
Bill had the best ears James could count on to pitch his idea. That evening, they decided to team up on the screenplay.
What he was looking to do was to write something that would be so irresistible that no one would not let him direct it.
Wisher took on the early scenes, introducing Sarah Connor and the police station shootout, while Cameron tackled the rest. Then Cameron shared the idea with his agent. These ears, however, did not appreciate the concept, and the mouth suggested forgetting this nonsense and coming up with something else. The meeting ended with the agent's dismissal.
I think that you have to find some kind of inner strength that says, what I'm doing is right.
Gail Ann Hurd, once Roger Corman's assistant and a fellow veteran of B-movie battles with Cameron, was the third person to hear about the Terminator.
I knew Gail was the type of material that she knew and that she understood, and she knew low-budget effects. So she was a natural choice.
After Cameron's departure from Corman's studio, Hurd had climbed the ranks from production assistant to full-fledged producer on several cheap flicks. She saw something special in Cameron's pitch and offered to produce the movie.
We decided that we would collaborate on the film and bring it to the screen.
In a deal that was practically a steal, she bought the screenplay rights for just $1, promising Cameron that not only would the movie be made, but he would also direct it. It was a bargain that would catapult Cameron's career, although it meant he'd barely earn a dime from the franchise's future spoils. No action figures, video games, or theme park rides revenue. Cameron would later refer to this contract as his crash course in Hollywood economics. Rewind to 1982, when theme parks were the least of Cameron's worries.
I wouldn't sell the script unless I went with it as the director, and of course that was a turnoff for almost everybody.
We were turned down by every major studio. However, we did have one connection to Orion Pictures. Barbara Boyle and Francis Dole, who had worked for Roger Corman at New World Pictures, were both employed by Mike Medavoy. And we slipped the script to them, and they loved it.
Ever the resourceful producer, Hurd managed to get Orion Pictures on board to distribute the film, provided she found someone to back the production. Landing a distributor is usually tougher than finding a producer, since it almost guarantees some return on investment. That's why Hemdale Pictures decided to join the venture. They weren't expecting a masterpiece, they just wanted a slice of the box office pie. But after Cameron flooded the head of the company with sketches and detailed descriptions of a dystopian future filled with robots, they teamed up with HBO and nailed down a budget of $6 million.
This is brilliant.
Next up was casting. Kyle Reese was first up, the rugged rebel dedicated to defeating machines, yet still possessing a tenderness that wins over Sarah Connor. Orion Pictures was on the lookout for a charismatic rising star, someone recognizable in Europe as well. Curiously, the execs at Orion saw their ideal heroic lover in a towering figure of muscles, a man who had risen to fame through the pumping iron dock.
I mean, it's terrific, right? So, I'm in heaven.
At a glitzy Hollywood party, an Orion executive bumped into Arnold Schwarzenegger and, struck by his physical presence, promised to send him the script for The Terminator. Arnold was intrigued by the story and agreed to meet with the director. Cameron, however, was blindsided by the suggestion.
It's fine. I hope he is.
The notion of Schwarzenegger as Reese seemed so off-base that he agreed to lunch with Mr. Olympia primarily to keep his superiors happy.
Mike Medavoy called up and said I had to talk to Arnold to play Reese. And I thought, okay, that's fine. That's a lame idea, frankly, but I'll talk to him.
Over a lunch, cloaked in more cigar smoke than a detective novel, they swapped tales about motorcycles and weaponry. As Cameron took in Arnold's chiseled jaw and intense stare, a light bulb went off. Arnold as Reese? Absolutely not! But as the Terminator? Bingo!
I came back to John Daly and said, look, it's not going to work as Reese, but I think you'd make a great Terminator.
You then did something really smart. You sent over to my office your painting that you did of Terminator.
Right.
And I looked at this painting and I said, I am the Terminator. And they called Lou, my agent, right away, and they called you and they said, I want to play the Terminator. And then the deal was made.
Previously, Cameron had imagined the machines as kind of a spy with a forgettable face who could easily infiltrate the rebels.
The Terminator I always saw as this kind of cipher, this kind of anonymous guy.
He thought Henriksen, the sheriff from Piranha II, was perfect, but in Arnold's emotionless gaze, he saw something more compelling. This epiphany not only shifted Lance to the role of Detective Vukovich,
same shit,
but also robbed another muscular guy of the role of a lifetime.
And believe it or not, O.J. Simpson was at one point brought up to star as the Terminator.
No one was really hooked to O.J. Simpson playing Terminator because he could not be sold as a killing machine. Yeah.
Securing Schwarzenegger meant that filming would be delayed for at least a year and a half, as the actor was already preparing for his role in Conan the Barbarian. Although Cameron was anxious, he had plenty to keep him busy. The role of Kyle Reese was given to the up-and-coming Michael Biehn.
It's a very complex character because at the beginning we look at him as a villain because he's going through the same movements and the same pattern of action as the Terminator. But then he has to change and become the hero, and then beyond the hero he has to become the romantic lead, if you will. So there's a transmigration of the character that happens.
This is great stuff. I could make a career out of this guy.
Michael came in to read for us, and he gave the best reading of any of the actors that we'd seen, but it was with a Southern accent. And we talked to his agent, very politely said, you know, Michael's very good, but we really don't want him to seem so specific that he comes from the South.
And myself and my agents were like, well, what are you talking about? You know, I'm not Southern. I'm from Nebraska. You know, that's Middle America. You know.
It turned out that he'd been reading for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof the morning, you know, that morning of the reading, and he hadn't shaken the accent.
I used to always wonder what you were thinking at that moment.
The last major role to be filled was that of humanity's savior mother, Sarah Connor.
When we met Linda, she also had the ability to transcend the genre and not be someone who simply screams really well, but someone who was believable as the girl next door, who could ultimately become the mother who saves humanity. And that's not an easy transition.
Boy, that's a tough one.
To keep busy while waiting for Arnold to wrap up his sword-swinging duties in Conan, Cameron polished the Terminator script and pitched new project ideas to producers. Geiler and Hill's Brandywine Productions, who had the rights to a couple of sequels and were planning a Spartacus remake set in space, were not moved by Cameron's pitch about sandals and gladiators in the cosmos. As a parting suggestion, they urged him to consider an idea for a sequel to Alien, the very film that had redefined science fiction and which had inspired Cameron to pen his own script over a year earlier after working on a low-budget ripoff at Corman Studio.
What a magnificent piece of work. So I asked him if he wanted to write that, and yeah, he did.
A week later, Cameron returned to Geiler and Hill's office essentially with a complete film in hand and was immediately hired to write the screenplay for Aliens. On that same busy day, he was also tasked with writing a less ambitious but decently paid sequel for Rambo.
Thanks.
Within 3 months, Cameron was expected to finalize the Terminator, turn dark corridors of LV-426 into a xenomorph petting zoo, and send Stallone back for another sun-soaked tour in Vietnam. That last gig stumbled a bit. Cameron was all set to pen a Rambo that mused on the existential dread of war, but Stallone was more in the mood for explosions and one-liners. Plus, Sly complained that all the juiciest lines were being hogged by the extras.
When he co-wrote Rambo along with Stallone, and I think that Cameron would tell you that most of what ended up on the screen is what Stallone wrote.
Yeah.
The whirlwind of revisions was so intense that Cameron only managed to write only 90 pages for Aliens before it was time to head to his own film set. Fortunately, those 90 pages so impressed 20th Century Fox that they agreed to wait for the final draft and even promised Cameron the director's chair if his debut film would be successful.
Wait. I don't want to know.
The final prep for the Terminator involved putting together a visual effects team, which, given the tight budget, meant they had to get pretty creative. Fantasy II Film Effects was brought on board for the miniatures and stop-motion animation. The devastated future world was contained within a mere 150 square feet.
We first built a 3-foot platform, which all the miniatures would be shot on. And in the background were cutouts of ruined cities, and in the foregrounds you had ruined buildings and skulls and things of that nature.
Good old forced perspective came in handy here. Skulls in the foreground were normal sized, while those in the distance were no bigger than peas set against tiny ruins. There was even a grenade on the set the size of a pin cap, filmed in slow motion to visually enhance its weight, making it appear more realistic and substantial.
And to try and get it to go directly underneath the treads was a pain in the ass. I think we got it on the 26th take.
Just one hunter-killer model was built. Any slight movement would sway it, ruining the take. So dozens of attempts were needed before this flying monster soared convincingly. The robot models were many too, with early CGI whizzes handling the laser shots.
And not just a single line that glowed. He wanted them to have a lot of depth, complexity. He had a color that he was really working for.
Resistance fighters were added into scenes using rear projection. Pre-filmed material was projected onto a screen while actors performed with a minimal set. The same method was used for scenes featuring Sarah Connor fleeing from an explosion.
Jim Cameron originally wanted to blow a full-size tanker truck up, but he couldn't because where he was shooting it in downtown Los Angeles was in front of the police armory. So what Gene had to do was create the entire atmosphere in miniature, 1/6 scale, in the front of the parking lot of Fantasy II in Burbank, and then blow up a miniature tanker truck.
The end of the explosion had to match what had already been shot 10 days before in principle. So we had to blow it up and have it end up looking like the wreckage.
The first time we tried this, the gas was loaded, the bombs were loaded, the wiring was all done, the cameras are ready. We've got 3 cameras on it and we're shooting 120 frames per second. Lights were ready, everything is ready. And what happened was the cable that was attached to the front axle pulled it so hard that it just ripped it out from underneath the cab, and there are the wheels, and I'd already started setting off the explosion, so I had to set it off the rest of the way. We put it out and there was a collective groan amongst everybody on the set. So we then right away started working on another model, and 2 days later we got the shot.
While Fantasy II Film Effects certainly brought their A-game to the set of the Terminator, they weren't the wizards behind the real magic. James knew that the key to the film's success lay in the seamless blend of makeup and animatronics. And when it came to the top dog in this field, nobody held a candle to Dick Smith. This guy scared the pants off of audiences in The Exorcist, transformed Brando into Vito Corleone, and splattered squibs of fake blood all over the sets of Taxi Driver, The Deer Hunter, and a slew of other iconic flicks.
He was the one who agreed to talk with us, read the script, and then said, you know, I'm not the right guy for this. The right guy for this is Stan Winston.
Recently Oscar nominated for the quirky Heartbeeps.
Some people use a Rolls Royce to plow turnips.
Though initially skeptical, it was Stan Winston who would turn Cameron's wild fantasies into tangible realities. They would become not just collaborators, but comrades in arms, eventually founding a visual effects studio peppered with Academy Awards in Stan's workshop.
And I was extremely fortunate in that I had amazingly talented group of guys to work with, whose names will remain off the screen, and no one will ever know who they are because I'm taking all the credit.
But back in '82, those glory days were still far on the horizon. Cameron first dazzled Winston with robot sketches so detailed they looked like ready-to-build blueprints. Stan joked that James was the best artist who ever worked for him.
Jim, I honestly, but why don't you give me a little sketch here and sort of milk out the sketches from Jim Cameron. Go, okay, we'll work on that. And then I could go over to the guys, we're done, we got it. Let's just, here's the body cavity, and here are the hips, and here's the shoulder. And by the time all was said and done, Jim had sketched every detail of the endoskeleton, and thank God for him. And then I ended up taking credit for it all, which I will continue to do.
In scenes where the machine self-repairs and pops out an eye, animatronics controlled by a skilled team of puppeteers took the stage. Though today that head might not win any awards for realism, back in '84, it chilled and thrilled in equal measure.
A couple of sculptures were actually done. We used one of them in the truck at the end when he was driving.
I will be looking at photographs, and I myself would ask myself, is this me or is this the dummy?
The interesting thing is that as good as the heads turned out, the makeup turned out actually better than we thought it would. And I think allowed Jim some more freedom as a filmmaker to shoot, for Arnold to be able to act more.
Get out.
And then a couple of close-up shots just to sell the depth inside that skull.
And the scene that truly steals the show is when the Terminator, let's just say, steps out of his skin. For the wider shots, they restored a stop-motion animation. Despite their best efforts, the 100-foot main puppet just wouldn't walk on its own. However, the stop-motion looked so unreal that Cameron kept it to a minimum. Instead, they crafted separate models of different robot body parts, which, through clever editing, made its existence believable on screen.
Knew that we could get some walking and some movement by creating an upper torso puppet of the Terminator that would be carried on the shoulders of a puppeteer who affected his walk and his limp and his dragging leg. Then we added our animatronic techniques to head and eye movement. We also built a full standing endoskeleton that Jim could shoot from head to toe, and the shots where he's blown in half and he's being dragged along. As far as the rigs we had mechanical insert arms. We developed our first robotic hands, which we would use as inserts and grab the grating and pull him forward. We also had our exploding dummy endo. It was a urethane, and the reason we had to make it out of urethane and we chromed that urethane was from a safety factor. We didn't want metal pieces, killing all of the people on the set.
The final stage of production was the soundtrack by composer Brad Fiedel.
He did the whole score in his garage. It was a cool garage. I mean, he had a lot of good gear.
Some of the most advanced devices of the time played the opening theme, The Machine's Heartbeat.
Part of the nature of the score is me trying to get control of the machines. While the machines are trying to get control of the people in the movie, I'm sitting here desperately trying to get control of these machines. So if my Prophet 10 was going boom, 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 and the other thing was going
Indeed, Cameron managed to make a real film, not some Piranha flick or Star Wars knockoff, but something truly significant. That's why the reaction from Orion Pictures felt like a slap.
The studio perceived it as a down and dirty action exploitation film.
Like a Charles Bronson film, 1 week in and out.
Crazy son of a bitch.
I made the statement that as a science fiction film, we should sell it on its own merits because that's a very particular audience. He said, this is not a science fiction film. You can't sell this as a science fiction film. Star Wars is science fiction. If you promise that, people are going to feel betrayed. If they go into the theater and you're telling them it's science fiction and it's this. I said, well, it does involve time travel and robots, two of the biggest mainstays of science fiction. All science fiction films aren't necessarily about space travel. He didn't get it.
Shut up! Still don't get it, do you?
Fearing that reviews would destroy its commercial potential, they held only one press screening and limited the advertising campaign to just 7 days. However, the few critics who did catch the show kicked off a wave of applause. The Los Angeles Times praised the thriller and its ferocity. Similar reactions came from the New York Times and Newsweek. And Time magazine even added the Terminator to its list of the top 10 films of the year, raking in about $80 million worldwide on a shoestring budget of $6 million. What was once pegged as potential B-movie fodder morphed into bona fide sensation, later becoming a VHS titan that eclipsed its theatrical earnings. By 2008, The Terminator had been enshrined in the National Film Registry as an unequivocal classic.
When I wrote it, I probably thought it stood the chance of being a success. I wrote it that way on purpose, but you never really believe that it's going to happen.
Cameron, meanwhile, soaked up the acclaim, tied the knot with Gale Ann Hurd, gave countless interviews, and cue the dramatic music, faced an accusation of plagiarism. Oh, the thorn in this tale? Harlan Ellison, who was convinced that Cameron had stolen his ideas from 2 episodes of the TV series Outer Limits.
Some years ago, before Terminator came out, I began to hear from people, gee, the script that they're going to shoot that reads an awful lot like your script for Soldier that you did on Outer Limits years ago.
Between the future warriors of Soldier accidentally time-traveling to our era and the mechanical hand in Demon with a glass hand that seemed to prefigure the Terminator, Ellison saw more than a coincidence.
So we went to, at this point, we went to Hemdale and Orion, and we said, I'm afraid we got him with the smoking gun. Now, do you want to do something about this, or do you want us to whip your ass in open court? I mean, perfectly happy to do it either way. Well, they settled.
Orion decided to cut Ellison a check and tack his name onto the credits to avoid a fuss. Cameron, none too pleased with this peace offering, didn't yet have the Hollywood heft to throw his weight around. Years later, his verdict on the matter was blunt and unapologetic. Harlan Ellison is a parasite who can kiss my ass.
Fuck you, asshole.
While enjoying his honeymoon, Cameron was simultaneously finalizing the script for the Alien sequel. The studio stayed true to their word and secured him as the director.
If Terminator hadn't been such a success when it premiered, I doubt that Jim would have been brought on to direct.
Moreover, Ridley Scott preferred to shoot unicorns and Tom Cruise as a forest boy over the dark tunnels of LV-426.
Be careful.
Let's face it, in the 80s, sequels were the reheated leftovers of the cinema fridge.
Everyone wants a sequel now. Back then, that was really much more of an anomaly.
Don't do that, because, anything that's good in your movie will be attributed to Ridley, and anything that's bad will be attributed to you. It's a no-win scenario.
Something Cameron knew all too well, given his own venture in skewering Piranha. However, in this case, he took a different approach. It made little sense to echo Scott's vision. Topping the original's horror was nearly impossible. In the first movie, Ridley introduced a near-indestructible killing machine that terrified anyone unlucky enough to cross its path.
So I had to come up with an end run around that would be equally entertaining for an audience, but in a different way. And to do that, we had to offer something in its place, which was an excitement factor or an exhilaration or something else, some other emotion.
The sequel would shift gears toward action, featuring not-so-invincible monsters, spectacular special effects, and a metaphor for the Vietnam War?
What?
Yes, it's not exactly subtle.
Good morning!
LV-426.
Consider this. The plot features a squad of heavily armed, tough Marines descending from the heavens in a spacecraft, much like a helicopter, intent on clearing out the dark, alien-filled corridors of a foreign land. Sound familiar? Just as in Vietnam, their brashness and underestimation of the locals led to dire consequences.
Do you get it?
To me, the whole Vietnam experience was almost science fictional, in the sense that it was the first real high-tech war that was waged against an extremely low-tech enemy and lost.
These twists helped snag Sigourney Weaver's interest, especially since she initially had no intention of reprising her role. Fox played a tricky game with Cameron. On one hand, allocated a generous budget of $18.5 million and allowed him to appoint Gale Ann Hurd as producer, despite some concerns about entrusting such an expensive project to newlyweds. But then Cameron discovered that Weaver wasn't even under contract yet. In fact, they hadn't bothered to contact her.
I don't understand this.
The script, written specifically for her, was approved and pre-production was underway. Yet the star of the show hadn't even heard about the film.
I was making a film in France, and I suddenly got this complete finished script that was all about Ripley. I remember thinking, I can't believe that no one even mentioned it to me. But I mean, I was thrilled.
Weaver was captivated by the author's fresh perspective, but made it clear it was time for Fox to show her the money.
Then there became a contract negotiation in which Fox was not necessarily willing to pay her the amount of money that she wanted.
To move things along, Cameron floated a rumor about replacing Ripley.
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
This tactic jolted both Weaver, who saw the sequel's potential, and Fox, who had fallen in love with the original script. A few days later, they struck a deal. Weaver would receive $1 million for Aliens, 30 times what she earned for the original.
All right, I'm in.
The rest of the cast was assembled on a budget. Filming was set in Britain, and the contract required hiring a quota of local actors. This brought Janet Goldstein and Mark Rolston, both Americans living in Britain, into the film. Despite having no prior experience with firearms or sports, Goldstein convincingly played Vasquez, a tough soldier.
I've never shot a gun before. I'm actually frightened of guns, you know.
When the recoil proved too much for her,
It was either too little or too much.
Gail Ann Hurd, an enthusiast of firearms and Cameron's frequent shooting range partner, stepped in to take the shot.
And because I had actually fired quite a few guns in my life, I was able to get the recoil right.
Al Matthews, another American expat, lent authenticity to Sergeant Apone.
Let's go, people. They ain't paying us by the hour. Let's go. Hit them out.
As a Vietnam War veteran with 2 Purple Hearts, he led the actors through a 2-week military boot camp, teaching them how to handle weapons and act like special forces.
It was physical. They went through maneuvers. They went through drills. And Al was their sergeant.
And they're handling it well. I mean, I'll have to put the boot in every now and then, but that's how it goes.
Badasses. Let's pack them in. Get in there.
Paul Reiser stepped out of his comic comfort zone to join the cast as
Burke, Carter Burke. I work for the company.
Paul managed to showcase his acting depth while simultaneously earning the title of most unlikable guy in the galaxy.
Did you enjoy working with Paul?
Paul has a nice smile, of course, but I wouldn't want to go so far as to say that we got along in any way.
Cameron's old pals filled out the rest of the ensemble. Lance Henriksen, who had done his cinematic time with Piranhas and Terminators, finally landed a significant part in Aliens as the android Bishop. A major preparation for Lance was the knife trick scene. The scene itself served as an homage to John Carpenter's Dark Star, a film that indirectly inspired Alien.
And so I practiced for a month. I mean, I split the tops of my fingers, learning how to really go fast.
Bill Paxton, whose hand became an unintended co-star in that knife scene, had been in Cameron's orbit since being roped into painting sets for Battle Beyond the Stars.
I actually was his set decorator on a film about 4 years ago. That's how we met.
Cameron kept him in the loop, giving him a shot in The Terminator and a role in Aliens that leveraged Paxton's ability to personify panic.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
As for Michael Biehn, he became Corporal Hicks by chance. Initially, the role was given to James Remar, who even began shooting in some of the opening scenes. However, he was dismissed due to creative differences.
I got into hash, and there was some local heroin that I decided to try. And it wasn't a time where you got a friendly slap on the wrist and sent to rehab. They just got rid of you.
Needing a quick replacement, Cameron dialed Biehn.
He said, can you be here Monday morning, take over this role? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I picked up a couple of quick scenes and got right into it and didn't have to go through all the Marine marching exercises, you know.
Besides the intense boot camp, the Marines also had to dive into the novel Starship Troopers. Get comfy with futuristic weaponry.
It's actually hard for me morally to justify being in a film with so many guns. I just find it very upsetting, and that's the biggest problem for me.
I love shooting the guns. That's like the best part of my job.
And add personal touches to their gear, like naming guns and decking out their armor with Lucky Charms.
I put my girlfriend's name on there. It was Louise.
I think my gun in the background here, I called it my bitch.
You could see it says adios on the gun.
While the on-screen team brought color to the set, the real MVPs were behind the scenes.
The power loader was, I think,
certainly our most challenging thing on the movie. We decided to build a stuntman inside it so that when Sigourney was in it, she was actually standing with her back right up against the stuntman.
While Cameron had the option to collaborate with H.R. Geiger, the original Alien designer, he chose instead to forge his own creative path.
I guess maybe it was just my own ego as an artist. I just felt like he'd made his stamp, and I knew from what I'd read that he had to do everything his way, and I had a very specific idea for the Alien Queen to extrapolate beyond what had been done before.
For the new creatures and aliens, James teamed up with his Terminator collaborator Stan Winston. When Winston first heard Cameron's pitch for a queen alien controlled internally by 2 puppeteers and externally by 10 more, he thought Cameron had lost his mind.
My second thought would be, yeah, we can do that.
And within days, they had rigged up a fiberglass frame draped in garbage bags for a proof of concept. A trial run in the parking lot of Winston's studio quickly turned skeptics into believers.
Okay, that's a cut.
Eventually, the 3-meter-tall queen, an intricate assembly of hundreds of parts and hydraulic system, came to life under the control of 16 puppeteers.
I like the queen, it's really great. I thought, it will work also without me very well.
Dangling from a crane and wired up with a spider web of cables, this animatronic marvel was maneuvered with car steering wheels off camera. This behemoth would later be celebrated as a landmark in animatronic technology, a title it is likely to retain given the shift towards CGI in subsequent years.
And I think probably the Queen Alien is the only actress that ever could take direction from Jim Cameron and get pissed back and back him off.
All right. And action.
Next, they upgraded the chest burster into an animatronic with limbs and designed facehuggers. In the film, only 2 monsters attack Ripley and Newt, but 10 puppets were needed for the scene. Some moved their limbs, others moved around, and some were used in the shot where they jumped onto Weaver's face. 9 operators controlled the facehugger in the tube.
Looks like love at first sight to me.
And Bishop dissected a puppet made from cow and chicken parts.
Magnificent, isn't it?
Human casualties weren't left out of the effects bonanza. A dozen human torso replicas stood in for actors in the goriest scenes. The Bishop android suffered the most. The poor prop was repeatedly hurled to the ground to achieve the perfect fall. In later scenes, its movements were manipulated with ropes yanked from off-camera. Don't worry though, the android's blood is a mix of milk and yogurt. A dummy also doubled for Newt in scenes where Weaver had to make a quick getaway from the Queen's lair. Weaver couldn't carry the girl for long, so designers created a lightweight mannequin for wide shots. And those planetary landscapes, buildings, and even clouds in the film's finale? All meticulously crafted miniatures.
And hopefully the blend off between the full size and the miniatures is smooth enough that you don't always know what you're seeing.
These mini marvels were so convincing that when the producers saw the first completed frames of the film, they thought about firing Cameron, mistaking them for budget-busting full-scale sets. Miniatures also appeared in unexpected places. Reduced copies of the Queen and the power loader were used for fight scenes that couldn't be filmed on set.
They had rods on their feet, and we cut little slots in the floor, and there would be a puppeteer under the floor sort of making these things walk.
They also transformed a decommissioned aircraft tug into the film's most expensive prop, the armored personnel carrier.
British Airways over at Heathrow do have these big towing vehicles, and at that time they were just re-equipping all the towing tugs with a new look, and we managed to get hold of one of the old ones that had 6-foot diameter wheels.
Costing more than Sigourney Weaver's paycheck, this hulking piece of machinery was slimmed down from a hefty 75 tons to a more manageable 30. When funds ran dry before shooting the hypersleep exit scene, Lamont didn't flinch. He crafted just 5 chambers and cleverly multiplied them with mirrors, creating an illusion of a dozen Marines waking from their slumber. The corridors, labs, colony entrance, dropship, and tunnels of aliens were all brought to life at Pinewood Studios, a place steeped in cinematic history with credits like James Bond and Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
You can't come in here. Back.
It was here that Cameron was supposed to get his real taste of big-time studio filmmaking. Instead, it felt more like a captain barricaded in his cabin during a mutiny. At Pinewood, unlike the usual practice where you rent an empty stage, you also got the local crew as part of the package. This crew treated filmmaking like clockwork factory jobs. They'd hit the pub for lunch and wrap up promptly at 5, tea breaks included.
That's a union regulation in England, so you're going to have a tea break. Whether you murdered the tea lady or not, there'd be somebody there the next day at the same time.
To them, Cameron was just some quirky outsider.
Because I don't think they'd seen Terminator, and he kept trying to have showings, and none of them would go.
Assistant director Derek Cracknell was particularly troublesome, often undermining Cameron's directions. He'd set up the lights and cameras his own way and took it upon himself to dictate the shooting of scenes. Having once been Kubrick's AD, he fancied himself more capable than this young American director.
Yeah, right.
Second team move up.
Well, let if Michael watches and gets them going, when he sees how get to here.
You have line of sight?
Yeah, we're over there.
It was the first AD. I mean, he kept calling me love and sweetheart.
Pick the stool up, love.
First time I walked on the set, the AD put his hand on my chest, and nobody ever touched me like that, stopping me. And I'm being from New York, I said to him, you ever touch me again, I'm gonna kick your ass.
Things escalated when he convinced the crew to strike, a bold move that nearly derailed the entire production.
Oh, hold on 1 second. This installation has a substantial dollar value attached to it.
Cameron had promised the studio a quick shoot of just 2.5 months. But the combination of pub trips and strikes threatened to blow that timeline.
Jim could not relate to what was going on. It was like they were having a party, and Jim was at war to finish this movie. It was a war.
In a decisive move, he fired Cracknell and replaced his main ally, cinematographer Dick Bush, with Adrian Biddle, who had worked for Ridley Scott, including on the iconic Apple 1984 commercial. After the cleanup, Cameron gathered the team and tried to find a compromise, promising more time for tea breaks in exchange for genuine help with filming. While the mutiny ceased, Cameron's speech before leaving the Pinewood set spoke volumes about the challenges he faced. This has been a long and difficult shoot, fraught by many problems, but the one thing that kept me going through it all was the certain knowledge that one day I would drive out of the gate of Pinewood and never come back, and that you sorry bastards would still be here.
He was very specific about it.
The global premiere in July of 1986 was nothing short of a triumph. The film raked in $130 million worldwide, not just thrilling the filmmakers, but also rescuing the studio from the brink of closure. Fox had changed owners several times over a few years and was constantly losing money. Cameron, however, played the role of studio savior. A decade down the line, Fox would place a whopping $200 million bet on his next epic. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Meanwhile, the sequel achieved the unprecedented. It surpassed the popularity of the original, brought new fans to the franchise, and received 7 Oscar nominations, a rare event for a science fiction film. For ages, the Academy had treated sci-fi like the fast food of film genres, but Aliens changed the game. The film scored nods for James Horner's score, Ray Lovejoy's editing, the bone-rattling sound, and Peter Lamont's sets. The sound editing team grabbed an Oscar, as did the wizards behind the visual effects.
We'd like to thank the members of the Motion Picture Academy, our producer, Gail Ann Hurd,
and most of all, the creative genius responsible for it all, Jim Cameron.
The crowning glory was the Academy nodding to Sigourney Weaver's stellar performance, a first for an actor in a sci-fi film. Thus, Cameron gave Hollywood 2 hits in 2 years. He saved Fox from bankruptcy and received carte blanche for his next project. It was time to dive into the abyss. Fox, the studio Cameron had rescued from financial ruin, was eager to fund any project he pitched.
A nuclear submarine sinks under mysterious circumstances. Right. You've got a crew of oil rig divers on the bottom of the ocean who get called in to find out what the hell's going on, and they start coming in contact with another intelligence.
We talking little space friends here?
But no, this wasn't aliens underwater, no monsters bursting from the seafloor. The abyss was the anti-aliens, where humans were the real monsters poised to destroy the world with their arms race and endless wars. Even the aliens would be the opposite of xenomorphs, no gaping maws ready to devour, instead, eyes filled with horror as we tore each other apart. But enough philosophy. Cameron spun a complex plot around this concept. Storms, military, tough guys, psychotic breakdowns, alien contact, the threat of global annihilation, and a couple on the brink of divorce. Fox was all in.
The easiest way to describe the abyss would be to say that this is an outer space adventure that takes place not in outer space, but at the bottom of the ocean.
The big question was how to film it. Any open water filming invited Murphy's Law. What could go wrong would go worse underwater.
There's no such thing as an easy shot underwater. Of course, I've always felt there's no such thing as an easy shot, but underwater, multiply that by 1,000.
Just look at Jaws. A 2-month shoot ballooned into nearly 6 with costs soaring. The shark broke down, lighting was a nightmare, the weather never cooperated.
It's not the time it takes to take the take that takes the time. It's the time it takes between the takes that takes the time that takes to take.
The only film with decent underwater scenes was The Deep, a Jaws cash-in.
And so I went to the guy that shot The Deep.
Enter Al Giddings, the giant of underwater cinematography and Cameron's first recruit.
His eyes were like a deer in the headlights. It's like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? Couldn't be building sets in the ocean. We looked at tanks. There was no tank big enough, no tank deep enough.
Typical Hollywood tanks were too small for Cameron's vision. Their ocean depths found an unlikely home, a half-built Cherokee nuclear power plant in South Carolina.
And Al and I get out there and we look down. It's a giant tank. And we look at each other like, we're going to shoot in there.
These pits, soon filled with 7.5 million gallons of water, would become Deep Core, the largest underwater set in movie history. It became their home for 2.5 grueling months. Next up, casting the main characters. At the heart of the abyss is a couple on the brink of breaking up, Bud and Lindsay. Cameron weaved a sincere and deep love story into this sci-fi epic, maybe drawing inspiration from his own life. He and Gail Hurd had lost their spark. The abyss would reunite Bud and Lindsay, spoiler alert. But for Gail and James, it marked the final act of their marriage.
So I think our career followed, meeting, falling in love, and then we made the abyss when we were divorcing.
But let's get back to the actors.
You could be more specific.
Fox wanted an A-list star for Deep Core's captain, suggesting Harrison Ford, Kurt Russell, and Mel Gibson. But Cameron chose Ed Harris.
Terribly sorry. What happened?
He was the real deal, looking every bit the rugged oil worker with piercing blue eyes.
All right, let's get ready to meet.
Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, who had charmed audiences in Scarface and The Color of Money, was cast as his wife.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm not.
Most other roles went to relatively unknown faces, but Cameron saved one part for an old friend, Michael Bain. His crazed look became one of the abyss's hallmarks.
What did you do to, keep your sanity during the shooting?
I'm not sure if I had my sanity.
Does this strike anyone as particularly psychotic, or is it just me?
Before filming, all actors went through diving courses and got their licenses.
And everything went fine. You know, Ed turned out to be a gifted diver. Mary, not so much. But she did it. She was a total pro. The other actors, I remember, really enjoyed the helmet training.
I never really thought of that as work. To me, it was an experience like a lot of people won't ever have.
You know, within a week or so, it was like they were like every other commercial diver I've ever been around, you know.
Excited at first, they admired the director, but within months, they were cursing him, realizing they were in for a tough ride.
We're going to be here a long time, because this is not going to be on schedule, I guarantee you that.
Let's go step by step. Locations chosen, actors cast. Now for the tricky part. Before filming could start, there were inventions to make, patents to file, and challenges to tackle that seemed like science fiction themselves.
There was always, you won't believe what's going to show up today.
First up, talking underwater.
I seem to be having a problem here.
Divers need their breathing apparatus, making clear dialogue tricky. Post-production dubbing is for wimps, so designer Ron Cobb, who had designed spaceships for aliens, created a helmet prototype supplying air from the side. Western Space and Marine took this design and made it work. By the start of filming, each actor and James had a helmet with an oxygen supply, microphone, and speaker. So yes, the actors really talked underwater.
Test, 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 1, 2, 3, 4. First recorded dialogue underwater on film for a theatrical motion picture in the history of the world.
The only tweak was adding bubbling sounds to replace technical noises.
Jim's talking and you got the...
Anyone in a helmet makes that sound. If they stop making that sound, we worry.
Next, lighting. Sunlight doesn't reach deep underwater, and any external light would ruin the illusion.
And the very stillness created an almost mirror surface. So we literally saw ourselves reflected in a giant 200-foot diameter mirror.
They covered the massive pool with a tent and filled it with millions of tiny black plastic beads to block the light.
We used beads instead of something laying in the water because of the safety factor. We had to be able to surface at any moment if we had a problem, especially diving with actors.
A severe storm later destroyed the tent, forcing night shoots, and those pesky beads turned into the crew's nightmare, finding their way into everything.
That all of us, I'm sure, have somewhere tucked deep in the folds of our bodies still to this day.
The next challenge was filming it all. On land, smooth shots come from cranes or tracks, but underwater, it's trickier. Cameron's brother Mike, a mechanical engineer, designed the Sea Wasp, a device propelling a user underwater. It could hit 3 knots, easily move up and down, pull 2 people, and let the cameraman focus on the shot. The brothers patented the device, and James rewarded Mike with a cameo as a drowned submariner with a crab crawling out of his mouth. Ew.
Oh, jeez.
Filming The Abyss was set to start in August of 1988, but the sets under construction since April lagged behind. Deep core was being finished while the tank filled with water, a process that took over a week.
It's an historic moment.
Set decorators worked waist deep in water on the station while Cameron shot miniatures of the submarine and the alien ship in a nearby tank. The submersibles, 1/4 scale models, had all the functionalities of full-size vessels. They had engines, moved underwater at 4 knots, and withstood collisions. Steve Johnson's team, known for Ghostbusters, created the alien puppets. Cameron wanted glowing aliens, so each puppet had hundreds of fiber optic bundles all gathered into a main cable on the figure's back, lit by a powerful projector with moving colored filters. Up to 40 puppeteers operated these intricate creations.
But when you have to actually make it function underwater, it's a whole other story. I mean, water basically just adds a level of difficulty to any human endeavor, no matter what it is.
The crown jewel of the props was the 7-ton model of the Benthic Explorer, filmed at sea.
The surface craft that was created was so large it actually had to get a Coast Guard license number, even though it was a quote-unquote miniature.
By By late August, filming finally began. Grueling 16-hour days were spent almost entirely underwater.
Now, the dive shooting is really exhausting. It's got to be the biggest sort of physical and mental challenge I've ever had, because I've got to do all my normal stuff, and then I've got to do it underwater, in a medium 800 times denser than air.
Oxygen tanks were refilled on site, and actors sometimes spent up to 5 hours underwater without a break.
Well, I'm sure somebody else talked about this. It's something called diver's delight. When you're down there for 3 or 4 hours, there's certain hygiene considerations that come up.
Diver's delight, of course, that's pissing in your wetsuit. It went down your leg and came up on your body, and it just felt really warm. And it was a nice feeling. Everybody did it, 45 people pissing in their wetsuits. I mean, it was amazing.
Continuous exposure to chlorine gave all the divers severe itching and changed their hair color.
Everybody got their hair bleached white. The hair fell off our arms, and we all got chlorine burns, and it was borderline kind of having to go to the hospital. It was just hell. And that's how we started. And then it got worse.
This sucks.
Drowning was the biggest fear.
We did have one incident where I almost drowned.
Cameron himself had a close call. His oxygen tank was nearly empty, but he wasn't informed, even though protocol required a 15-minute warning.
Jim, check your air for me, will you?
His air supply suddenly ran out, and he couldn't call for help. Tearing off his helmet, destroying the expensive equipment inside, he swam to the surface. A safety diver noticed him and, thinking Cameron was panicking, grabbed him and offered an oxygen hose. Unfortunately, it was faulty and filled Cameron's lungs with water. Unable to communicate the problem, Cameron punched the diver and freed himself. Miraculously, he made it to the surface. After coughing up water, he fired the AD responsible for monitoring his tank and the diver who hadn't checked the hose. Then he demanded a new helmet and went back to work.
I always say to everybody at the beginning of a movie, welcome to my nightmare. My imagination is now going to be your enslavement for the next few months.
Despite this nightmare, Cameron was at least an experienced diver. The actors had much less experience and faced even tougher challenges.
Here we go. Take a deep breath, Emmy.
They performed dangerous stunts themselves.
And regulator out. And action, action.
Master Antonio held her breath for one scene.
That's a cut.
While Harris and Leo Burmester did the same and swam 40 feet. Only when they signaled they couldn't breathe did rescue divers come to their aid from off-screen.
So he's not going to be there the second you go like this, but it seemed like an eternity. It certainly expanded our ideas of what we could do.
Harris had the worst luck. Remember the liquid oxygen from Cameron's teenage story? It made it into the abyss, but it doesn't actually work in real life. So Bud's helmet in the final part of the movie was filled with dyed water.
Fluid breathing suit.
Are you actually breathing under the liquid?
No, you just pretend.
Harris held his breath and wore special contact lenses to see underwater. In one take, the safety diver responsible for his air hose got tangled in cables.
Did this sign, out of air, unhook myself, get over to the wall, got no air, I'm waiting for air, and this guy's hung up somewhere, I got nobody to give me air.
When Harris signaled he couldn't breathe, another diver rushed in, but inserted the hose upside down, causing Harris to inhale water twice.
And for a split second, I really thought I was a goner, and then Al came swimming over, the cameraman, put his regulator in the right way, took a big breath, and I went, man, okay, let's go up for a second. But I remember driving home that night, and I just broke down, man, I was just weeping. And I really thought I was gonna die for a second, and though it never got that dangerous again, I always knew I was gonna have to go back down in this fucking fluid breathing suit.
Maybe the conception of going into a giant filming tank and doing all this stuff and putting actors in helmets was a dumb idea. It seemed cool at the time.
Cameron ruled the set with an iron fist, running it like a dictatorship. In his relentless pursuit of the perfect shot, he pushed everyone to the brink with take after take.
And also because of the fact that Jim's a perfectionist. He wants it over and over and over.
Grueling scenes dragged on until James was satisfied with every minuscule detail.
I can sort of make the cognitive leap to what the end picture will look like. It always is a glorious picture. It's the steps to get there, that sometimes are pretty grueling.
The crew's morale hit rock bottom, and they scribbled abuse over abyss on their script covers. The boiling point arrived during Lindsay's resuscitation scene. All the key actors nailed an incredible performance from the first take, but Harris's hand obscured Mastrantonio's face. Cameron, ever the perfectionist, ordered a reshoot. Another torturous take followed, where the character's raw nerves contrasted sharply with Lindsay's lifeless body. Then disaster struck. The camera operator ran out of film at the worst possible moment.
She just said, hey man, we are not animals.
She runs off the set. It's like, who could blame her?
Jim was pretty speechless because he knew she had every right to feel the way she was feeling, but didn't know what to say to her, you know.
They had to film the rest of the scene without her. The film's emotional peak close-ups of Bud crying and screaming had Ed Harris acting alongside a bag of sand as his partner.
There's a camera there with a big hole cut, down below the floor. It's a pretty amazing piece of work.
Even the animals didn't escape the stress. For the scene demonstrating the effects of liquid oxygen, they used 5 rats. And yes, they performed the experiment for real. Cameron consulted with Johan Kilstra, a top researcher in the field, who provided all the necessary knowledge to recreate the experiment on camera. The liquid was heated to the rat's body temperature and saturated with oxygen for a day.
And then I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to film it, which is probably not so smart because we probably should have done it off in a corner someplace in case it didn't work, but it worked. Meanwhile, the whole crew's standing around going, holy shit.
Damn rats breathing that shit. That is no bullshit, hands down, the goddamnest thing I ever saw.
Despite the happy ending, animal rights activists criticized the film, leading to the scene being cut from the theatrical release in 7 countries, including the UK.
Because the royal veterinarian felt that it was painful for the rats or something like that. I don't know how he knows that.
Ironically, despite all the technical breakthroughs, the impressive practical effects, The Abyss secured its place in history because of one computer graphics scene. Yes, I'm talking about the water tentacle that skillfully mimicked the faces of the main characters. This relatively simple effect by today's standards changed the course of cinematic history. Dennis Muren, one of the founders of Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, the visual effects company that brought Star Wars to life, believed ILM needed its own CGI department. The Abyss was the project that would prove Muren right.
Jim was hesitant about talking to a big company like us because he's a very much hands-on person and thought he would lose control. But we're ready for something really big, and that was the perfect project.
Dennis showed Cameron some test animations, primitive but promising, and warned that the final result, consisting of 20 shots, wouldn't be ready for 9 months. Considering the best idea up to that point had been
claymation with white clay, and we'd project high-speed photography of water.
James agreed to Muren's gamble. The final result not only amazed the director, but also opened new horizons for filmmakers. Just 2 years after The Abyss, that water tentacle paved the way for the creation of the T-1000, and one of the greatest sequels in history. But back to The Abyss. After 140 grueling shooting days, it was time for post-production. Many effects still weren't ready. Test screenings included hand-drawn sketches of waves in the final scenes. No surprise, audiences laughed at the most dramatic moments.
All right, well, let's screen the one without the wave. That'll be better. And it's like, it wasn't any better.
Fox had spent over $45 million on the film, even by conservative estimates. And this wasn't the reaction they'd hoped for.
And then we thought, well, at least we could save money if we released the one without the wave.
Cameron wanted to show viewers the horrors humanity commits, addressing issues of genocide and war, while Fox wanted a summer blockbuster.
20th Century Fox hopes it's not placing $50 million plus into an Abyss. This star-studded premiere in New York is but part of the studio's costly publicity splash for the movie, in hopes of helping The Abyss ride the wave of big-money summer movie blockbusters.
On August 9th, 1989, The Abyss hit theaters without the wave scenes and the parts focusing on humanity's sins, for which the aliens intended to punish us. I'll admit I've only seen the director's cut, which came out 4 years later with an additional $500,000 in funding. So I can't imagine the confusion of the audiences who left the theater after the premiere.
I think the film's really good for the first 2 hours. I think the last 10 minutes or so is really embarrassing.
Now, many people were bothered by the ending of The Abyss. One person told us it was stupid. Someone else said they'd seen it all done before and done better.
The Abyss became Cameron's first box office flop. At the Oscars, it won just one award for Best Visual Effects. But let's be honest, for 9 out of 10 directors, The Abyss would be the pinnacle of their career, something they would talk about at Comic-Con booths into their old age. For Cameron, it was just a valuable learning experience. I knew this was going to be a hard shoot, but even I had no idea just how hard. I don't ever want to go through this again. Yet, he also had cause for optimism. He founded Lightstorm Entertainment, his own studio named after the lighting that heralds the Terminator's arrival. Plus, he started a new relationship. Even before his divorce from Gail Hurd was final, he got involved with a woman who seemed to embody the heroines of his movies, Kathryn Bigelow. Cameron married Kathryn and, true to his nature, immediately intertwined his personal and professional life. This time he took on the role of producer, helping Kathryn secure funding for a lackluster action script titled Johnny Utah. They rewrote the script together, transforming it into a much darker action film. This collaboration marked the beginning of their disagreements. Cameron couldn't fathom why Kathryn insisted on casting the goofy guy from Bill and Ted for the lead role.
No way.
Yes way, Ted!
She saw an action star in the scruffy, smiling actor. Once they cut his hair and paired him with Patrick Swayze, Bigelow ended up with one of the most surprising summer blockbusters, which later gained cult status.
The ex-presidents rip off banks to finance their endless summer.
Cameron didn't bask in his partner's success for long. Two producers, Mario Kassar and Andrew Vajna, were keen to help him make a grand return. After the success of 3 Rambo films, their company was quickly taking over Hollywood, throwing money around and snapping up talent.
Mario Kassar called me up and said, all right, we got the rights to Terminator 2. Our first choice is for you to direct it. I said, I don't know. And they said, well, we'll pay you $6 million. I said, okay. That's pretty much how it went.
Wanting a sequel that would rival the original, they approached Cameron with a record-breaking promise to invest over $100 million in the project.
It's like going to a restaurant and you either order a great meal that costs you a lot of money, but it's worth eating it, or you go to have a hamburger for $2. I mean, it's your choice.
The catch? He had to finish the film by early July 1991 to hit the summer blockbuster season. Cameron jumped at the opportunity, especially since he already had a dusty idea for the sequel in his archives. In the original script for the Terminator, the T-800 was supposed to be killed midway through, with a liquid metal Terminator sent back in time afterwards. Cameron had initially shelved this expensive idea, thinking no one would fund such a costly venture from a newcomer. But now, with an almost unlimited budget and groundbreaking CGI from ILM, Cameron reunited with his old friend Will Wisher.
Jim called me up one day and he said, it's good news and some bad news. And I said, what's that? He says, well, the good news is we're going to make Terminator 2. And the bad news is we're already behind schedule.
They dove into the sequel script, designing future challenges for ILM and Stan Winston's team. The more complex the scenes, the more Cameron's imagination soared.
But the question was, can we hang the whole movie on a soft surface character with CG?
Jim would say, oh, geez, I better call ILM and see if they can do this.
And I said, Dennis, can we do this? He said, yeah, we can do it. He had no idea how to do it.
He showed the finished script to the producers on a flight to Cannes, where they planned to announce the sequel.
It's only one flaw. I'm still writing at my house while everybody's showing up at the plane. And I remember literally pulling the script out of the printer and racing to the airport and getting there like 20 minutes late.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was also on that flight. Cameron had convinced him to reprise his role almost immediately.
I hand it to Arnold, say happy reading, you know, and then I go straight to sleep.
My first thought was bullshit.
Arnold worried that turning the T-800 into a good guy might tarnish his original character. He even asked Cameron to have the T-800 kill a couple of people before meeting John. But the director stood firm.
Now you're the good guy, you're the defender, you're the protector. He said, okay, all right. Can I shoot him in the leg? I said, yeah, let's just shoot him in the leg. How's that? He goes, oh, that's good.
He'll live.
Linda Hamilton didn't think twice about coming back for the sequel. Cameron caught her attention with a simple plot. Sarah Connor, almost a machine herself now, must protect her son while being locked up in a mental hospital. To prepare, Linda trained for 4 months.
A few days before we start shooting, Jim Cameron says to me, let's all get together and have a nice dinner. Linda comes in and she takes her sweater off, and then looking at her arms, veins on the biceps, everything was like a bodybuilder except miniature.
I do remember the fierce pride that I had to show to Arnold.
There isn't a higher compliment than praise from the Terminator himself.
The senator said, I can't believe that son of a bitch is fucking more cut than me.
But it was Cameron who was most taken with Hamilton. Their romance blossomed during filming, though they denied it fiercely at first. They only came clean after the movie was released and Cameron had divorced Kathryn Bigelow.
I bet.
Casting John Connor was the toughest challenge. The search spanned the entire country with hundreds of boys auditioning. Edward Furlong, however, was found right on the street. Casting agent Mally Finn, then a rising talent scout, snapped his picture and brought him in for an audition. That single Polaroid secured Mally's place in every Cameron film thereafter.
She literally just went out to find raw, untried talent.
And Jim said, Eddie, don't tell anybody, but we picked you for this film. And I felt like hugging Jim, but he's a guy, so I didn't hug him.
Why?
What do you mean, why? Because you can't.
Why?
Because you just can't, okay? Trust me on this.
Then there was the liquid Terminator.
Heroes are measured against the villain. So how are you going to have something that's scarier, deadlier than Arnold as a T-800 Terminator?
Initially, he didn't even know what the character would look like. Stan Winston, who worked on the effects, couldn't grasp how the villain could be just a liquid mass and urged Cameron to give the antagonist a solid form. That's when Cameron had a revelation. The Terminator should be a cop. Who could be more terrifying in early 90s Los Angeles than a police officer? This wasn't a joke, it was a sharp psychological insight. Cops embodied power and a lack of empathy. Cameron initially saw Billy Idol in this role. Early sketches depicted Idol in a police uniform. Cameron even reached out to Idol's agents, but a broken leg from an accident ruled him out. This misfortune paved the way for Robert Patrick, who landed the most iconic role of his career.
If you think about it, if the way to be introduced to the world is as a Terminator, kicking the shit out of Arnold Schwarzenegger, tell me another role that's as cool as that.
Before meeting Cameron, Patrick had played a few villains in Roger Corman's films and had a role as a terrorist in the sequel to Die Hard.
Hey, asshole, what do I look like to you? A sitting duck.
But it was the T-1000 that would forever change his life. With a few lines and a cold, emotionless stare, Patrick's portrayal sent chills down the spines of generations of fans of this future classic.
The thing I like about Robert was he kind of looks like a cat. It's almost like it's about senses with him. You know, you feel that he's very in touch with the world and analyzing it and observing it.
I invented the process right there. I showed them what the T-1000 would look like.
There was a zen calm about him, and that calm made him scary.
Damn, you all right?
Patrick really threw himself into preparing for his role. He even mastered the art of running while breathing only through his nose, aiming to look more robotic. Patrick became so adept at this technique that he once ruined a take.
We had a shot where Eddie was on the motorcycle that was being pulled by the insert car. Jack Carpenter, the insert car driver. I said, no, he's not going to catch us. I said, he's going to catch us.
First time we did the run, I caught the kid. How fast you running? I have no idea.
I said, okay, we can't use that take. John Connor just died and the world just ended.
Yet what cemented Patrick's place in cinematic history wasn't his speed, but the behind-the-scenes work of countless artists.
They only had 9 months, which was really the scary part, to do these really complicated shots. They had to create the new technology, then they had to apply it and get it done on a schedule.
James Cameron brought together two powerhouse teams to create the film's groundbreaking special effects. Visual effects fell to ILM under Dennis Muren, while Stan Winston handled practical effects.
It was a constant, little juggling act in the very beginning to figure out what was going to be done optically, what was going to be done as a real-life effect, and then what things from us would be needed for ILM to help them work things out optically, and vice versa. And it just worked out as perfect as it possibly could have.
Stan Winston would start the effect, the CG would do the hard part, let's say one of the shotgun wounds healing or a head changing geometry in some way that a physical puppet couldn't do. And then he would carry on after that, where we had various types of rubber suits that had been vacuum metallized so that they were reflective as if they were liquid metal, and in quick cuts we got away with it.
Although ILM had tested efforts for the T-1000's morphing during The Abyss and Ron Howard's Willow, Terminator 2 posed a fresh challenge. They made an exact replica of Patrick, scanning him with a large laser over 3 days.
Robert was great. He came up to ILM in San Francisco before we started the show. He was a great sport, and whatever crazy thing we asked him to do, he did it.
I'm sitting in a chair, like this, and I've got to stay totally control, hit this emotion, and lock on this expression, like,
We got Robert, and he was up here, and we painted a grid on him and shot a lot of footage of him, and we could see how the grid moved as his muscles moved and his bodies moved around.
And we sort of decided to concentrate on the Robert Patrick form, because Robert is the T-1000. We decided we're going to study his body, we're going to find a way to capture his quality, and that was, for us, was going to be the key that drove our visual approach to the whole T-1000.
The standout shot featured the liquid Terminator emerging from the fire. It was filmed twice, once with the actor and once without. The operator had to replicate the exact movements each time, succeeding only after 20 takes. But the effort paid off. The sparks reflections on the T-1000's body showcased the future of this technique.
No cut. It's impossible. You've never seen it.
They also crafted the scene where the T-1000 slips through metal bars, overlaying the digital model onto Robert Patrick himself and switching seamlessly between the real and digital actor.
Then the gun doesn't go through to remind you that it's something special.
For all the credit we give to the digital wizards, the real magic came from blending those effects with practical ones.
And action.
Take the bullet holes on Patrick, for instance. Those were made with rubber gadgets triggered by tiny explosions and springs, all hidden under his clothes. This setup, dubbed the bullet hit shirt, was later enhanced by CGI to make the wounds heal. Then there were the T-1000's injuries. Winston's team created a bunch of creepy puppets for different stages of his damage. Remember the donut head, the splash head, and the bisected one? And Arnold had his own set of puppets too.
Okay, you don't get paid, so what? I'll make it for you, okay? Relax.
The highlight being the bust used in the scene where they take out the processor.
Do it.
You probably know it, but there was no actual mirror in that scene. Linda Hamilton's twin sister stood in as Sarah's back, while the puppet doubled for Arnold. The actors practiced this bit for over 2 weeks to get the timing just right. And speaking of iconic scenes, there's the one where T-800 gets shot. To take all these shots, they created a life-sized puppet operated by 2 off-screen technicians.
For this, consider the fact that it's going to be good shots. It'll only be on pistol.
They also reused a trick from the first movie where Arnold peels the skin off his robotic hand, which was attached to his shoulder. In the initial shot, he cut his real arm with a hollow knife, complete with fake blood. And speaking about makeup, it played a big role too, especially for Arnold. For the last part of the film, he spent up to 5 hours in a makeup chair every day.
I don't know how much longer I can take this.
He doesn't complain.
All right.
but I need my foot massages. I'm too handsome. No camera can take all these good looks. So what they do in every movie basically is they put appliances on to kind of tone my looks down a little bit, so I match up to the rest of the actors in the movie.
All right. Wow! 2.5, 3 hours and he's done. The next stage for the makeup, it's basically the same that Arnold had before, just more chrome, more appliances. He'll have his eye plugged up so he won't be able to see out of it. And it'll take probably an hour, hour and a half longer to put on. He's gonna love it.
Holy shit.
I need a vacation.
Winston's team crafted and burned dolls using pneumatic guns to tear the skin off of Sarah. Stan admitted that even he felt creeped out during these shoots, which says something when coming from a man who created this, and this.
It was very unsettling. And it was the one time when you got a little uncomfortable because it wasn't pleasant to look at while you were shooting it. But it is the important aspect of the film.
We've talked a lot about the pre-planned scenes, but even without those, the movie had its share of epic moments. Take the prologue, for example. It showcased the future war in all of its terrifying glory with real, controllable T-800 models marching across the screen.
It's the same endoskeleton, but it's much more technically advanced than the endoskeleton in the first movie. It's actually artistically advanced, so they can do more. There's more life to these endoskeletons.
They paid homage to the first film by using old-school stop-motion animation for the background machines. The foreground, though, was where the magic happened. One T-800 had a spike in its foot designed to crush a skull on contact. Knowing Cameron's penchant for multiple takes, Winston's team molded 28 wax skulls for this shot. By 3 a.m., after the 26th take, a frustrated Cameron called it a night. The team braced for a meltdown tomorrow when the skulls ran out. To everyone's relief, the next morning, Cameron declared that take 5 was perfect. Phew!
It looks pretty spectacular.
Then there's the legendary arrival scene from the future. For this, they used 2 identical trailers. In the first part of the shot, they used a normal trailer. Then they stopped the camera, switched to a trailer with a section cut out, and dug a hole in the asphalt. The first major action scene? Oh, you know, just a casual chase through the valley flood channels packed with dozens of dangerous stunts.
I had a specific image for that sequence, which was you're a rat in a maze and you can't get out. And if you've ever been in one of those drainage systems, once you're in, you're kind of stuck there for a long time.
Fun fact, the truck's roof wasn't originally supposed to be a convertible. But despite meticulous planning, no one had measured the height of the overpass above the channel. So Cameron, being the mad genius he is, decided to improvise. Another memorable moment, the shootout with police cars. Picture this. A pyrotechnic symphony that ends with a building explosion. Surprisingly, this wasn't a miniature, but a real explosion, which left the structure mostly intact. The secret lay in directing hundreds of liters of gasoline and barrels of powder to detonate through the windows.
Supposed to roll? That was a rehearsal. I was waiting for your cue, Jim.
Then came the highway chase, the film's most intense and challenging sequence to execute. Midway through filming, Cameron realized the liquid Terminator didn't have enough hands to pilot the helicopter and reload his gun simultaneously. He called Winston's team in the middle of the night and they crafted a 4-armed costume from available materials on their way to the set. But wait, there's more. The helicopter pilot, a Vietnam War vet, handled the stunts like a pro, but the cameraman, not so much. Too scared to shoot the scene where the helicopter flies under an overpass, he handed the camera to Cameron, who filmed the scene twice himself. One take in front of and one behind the helicopter. The grand finale took place at a rented factory. The star prop of the scene, molten metal, was actually a mix of dramatic lighting, a translucent material called Metasil, smoke, and pyrotechnics. While Cameron managed to include almost everything he envisioned in the movie, there was one concept he had to drop: the time machine hidden deep in Skynet. But don't worry, those sketches didn't gather dust. They made a cameo in the film Contact 5 years later. Even after filming wrapped, Cameron had an incredible task ahead. He had 300 kilometers of film, hundreds of hours of footage that needed to be condensed into a feature-length movie. In the end, less than 1% of the material made it into the theatrical release. Dozens of scenes were left on the cutting room floor.
There's not much time left in the world, Sarah.
One of the things I always feel strongly about in a sequel is that it shouldn't require you to have seen the first film. It should be self-contained.
You're strong, Sarah. Stronger than you ever thought you could be. On your feet, soldier.
It didn't surprise me that this didn't make the cut, because you've only got so much movie, and it's not part of the storytelling. It's more of like, well, remember this.
From a vision that showed Sarah Connor's sensitive side to numerous episodes featuring the T-1000. Honestly, those T-1000 scenes were better off cut. In the director's cut, Robert Patrick's character mimics human emotions too much, which makes him less scary.
Do you have a photograph of John?
Yeah, sure, hold on.
Another crucial part of post-production was sound design. All the pricey effects by ILM and Winston Studio got a major boost from Gary Rydstrom's creativity.
Sounds that seem organic and real, but they're bigger than anything you've heard before. It's sound effects with a lot of testosterone. Different layers are chosen for being exactly the right sound for that layer. So there's a lot of details that go into making something that you then believe has been recorded on the set.
The shape-shifting sound, that was dog food falling out of a can.
The ILM effect, which is brilliant, I don't know what it costs, but a lot. And the sound effect is about 35 cents.
Even more amusing is that Gary, along with the visual effects wizards, snagged an Oscar for the film. But that came later. First, Terminator 2 hit theaters on the planned weekend right before the 4th of July and raked in over $30 million. More than half of all tickets sold that weekend were for James's new film. Soon, T2 would gross over $500 million worldwide and make untold amounts from VHS sales and merchandise.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Once again, Cameron built on the success of the first film. Just like with Aliens, he expanded the fan base without upsetting the original's devotees. What did anger fans, though, were the endless sequels that squeezed every last cent from the franchise's most loyal followers.
I came from a future like that. It failed.
Meanwhile, 20th Century Fox finally managed to pin down the elusive director. They waived an offer he couldn't refuse, a multi-picture deal with a whopping $500 million budget. Cameron would keep the intellectual property rights, and his own company, Lightstorm Entertainment, would handle international distribution. Projects under $70 million, they'd get a green light without so much as a nod from the studio. Meanwhile, his pal Arnold Schwarzenegger was in a rut after the colossal flop of Last Action Hero.
You think you're funny, don't you?
I know I am. I'm the famous comedian Arnold Braunschweiger.
Schwarzenegger.
Gesundheit.
I remember calling Arnold on the Saturday morning, and I hadn't really read the news. I said, "So, how'd the picture open?" He said, "Terrible." He sounded like he was in bed crying.
I was just putting myself together.
I said, "What are you going to do?" He says, "I'm just going to hang out by myself." That's the only time I've ever heard him down.
Arnold needed a comeback, and fast. That's when he stumbled upon La Totale,
a little French movie that no one saw.
Comedy about a spy whose family thinks he's an ordinary clerk.
It was very entertaining and very well done. The concept is just so refreshing. It's so new.
Excited, he showed it to Cameron, who loved the idea of a James Bond-type character who also had to do the dishes at home.
Arnold's bringing me a project that he believes in. He'd never done that before.
Despite the original film's light action, Cameron saw the potential for intense fights and thrilling chases.
He said, let's make it big. And I said, yeah, let's make it big.
He jumped into writing the script. But there was a hitch. While Cameron's films had humor, it was usually sharp one-liners or quirky characters, not full-blown comedy.
In some ways, True Lies is one of the scariest movies that I've done because tonally, it was a comedy from the beginning, an action comedy.
Stay.
I was very nervous tonally. I wasn't that nervous about how to execute the film because we'd already done complex stuff, but I was very concerned about it stylistically.
And what the hell were you thinking?
Then came a major snag with his Fox deal.
Well, that's it then, right?
A glaring oversight in the Lightstorm contract meant Cameron needed a completion bond, a guarantee the film would finish on time and within budget. The catch? This bond could only be obtained in advanced production stages, when the studio had already spent money on actor fees, sets, costumes, and more.
That's a nice piece.
Essentially, he needed a budget to get a bond, but he needed a bond to secure the budget. This bureaucratic catch-22 spelled the end of the $500 million deal and Cameron's partnership with Lightstorm's manager. Despite the hiccup, Fox was still keen on the project. They renegotiated, transferring international distribution rights to Fox and granting Cameron a staggering $115 million budget. Yet another record for the most expensive film ever made.
Magnificent, isn't it?
Next up was casting. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the biggest action hero of the decade, was a shoo-in for the lead. For the supporting cast, Cameron rounded up some character actors and, of course, his old buddy Bill Paxton.
Hey. My dad was a traveling salesman, came up with a lot of good ideas, and I would use a lot of lines of his. I would just throw them out in a rehearsal, and Jim liked a lot of them.
See, it's not just a car, it's a total image. An identity you have to go for.
He would always bring more. Even if I shot down 9 ideas and used 1, he was happy.
Paxton had a knack for bringing a mix of chaos and charm to any project, like an uninvited guest who somehow makes the party better.
I mean, he played Simon to the hilt. I mean, Simon is a crack-up.
But the real challenge? Finding the right actors for the protagonist, wife, and sidekick. Cameron needed talent who could improvise and bring their own flair, given his shaky confidence in his own comedic chops.
You know what? I think you're going about this whole thing all wrong.
Enter Tom Arnold, then known more for his stand-up comedy and high-profile marriage and divorce to Roseanne Barr.
Well, by now, you know the romance has gone out of the relationship between Roseanne and Tom Arnold. Roseanne is filing for divorce. Insiders say Tom may have taken up with another woman.
You know what? I say we concentrate on work, buddy.
Despite the modest resume and tabloid drama, Cameron was struck by Tom's wit and cast him as Gib. The studio was stunned, but Tom's performance silenced the skeptics.
Now what?
The real casting conundrum was finding the wife. Cameron had Jamie Lee Curtis in mind, having admired her work since Catherine Bigelow's Blue Steel.
Not bad, huh?
It seemed like a no-brainer, but Schwarzenegger wasn't feeling it.
Or he thought he didn't want Jamie. He said, well, she's too beautiful. Nobody's going to believe her as a housewife. Like, Arnold, leave that to me. So I started looking at every other actress.
Maybe he didn't see her comedic potential, or maybe he felt awkward about playing her love interest after recently directing her dad, Tony Curtis. Cameron spent 3 months auditioning other actresses only to rewatch A Fish Called Wanda.
And she's perfect. I mean, I thought I was going to watch 5 minutes, and I wound up watching the whole damn thing, and she was perfect. I call Arnold, say, come on over. And he sits down, says, yeah, what? I said, okay, it's Jamie. And there was a moment where he just froze. And then it was like, okay, let's try it.
And after filming, he showed his appreciation by sharing top billing with Jamie.
The movie is finished. And the phone rang. It was Jim Cameron. And he said, I went to Arnold and asked him if I could put your name above the title of the movie.
He says, you know, the movie wouldn't be what it is without her. And she's so amazing. And she deserves to be above the title.
So much effing money is spent on lawyers and agents for credits. It's a big business.
And I think that's a beautiful window into how his mind works. Very, very few people in Hollywood are like that.
It was a very moving moment for me. And that movie, of course, changed my life.
Another crucial task was picking the director of photography. Cameron went with Russell Carpenter, a relatively unknown talent whose biggest credit was Pet Sematary 2.
And Eddie Furlong was in that. And Eddie Furlong's people also mentioned my name to Jim. He wanted to do a film called Crowded Room. That picture went away because of some rights problems. So off I go to New Orleans to shoot this picture with John Woo. When I'm down in New Orleans, I get a call from Jim's producer, Stephanie Austin, and she says, Jim wants to talk to you about this next project. The only next project I see is this big Arnold Schwarzenegger film called True Lies. And I'm not putting my name and that project together in the same thing. I go to this meeting, and this is the picture he's talking about. You know, he never said, would you like this? Would you be interested in doing this? Never. You know, it was just like he just said, we'll be doing this. And then in Florida, we'd probably try this technique because it hasn't been done before, but I think it can work. Shake his hand, run to the phone booth, call my wife and said, I think I was just hired to do this big thing, you know.
Filming True Lies kicked off in August 1993 and quickly earned its stripes as one of Hollywood's most chaotic and dangerous productions.
It was all real people, real place, real time, real action. It was crazy.
Filming on Florida's 7 Mile Bridge, her character dangled from a burning limo's sunroof.
And it's a little weird to have a helicopter fly over your head and a guy like reaching his hand down and you're reaching up and grabbing and holding on and he's pulling you and then he lets go, and none of that is a special effect. None of that is like on a soundstage. None of it. Donna Keegan, my stunt woman, does the pull-out, the actual stunt, which is insane.
At the last second, Donna slides in, she gets in position, and the thing goes off the end of the bridge.
I then got wired up in the same rig that she was in. So it's like the shots of me going, were shot that day. It really was magical to be a part of something like that. To be able to be that person in that sequence was really, really, really exciting.
Perhaps the craziest stunt involved a jet fighter amidst Miami skyscrapers.
John Bruno was a visual effects supervisor that I had worked with over the years. He was with me on The Abyss, and he came up with this crazy idea. We were kind of doing storyboards in the pre-production, and he said, why don't we put the jet on the building?
The crew used a filming crane on a construction crane, allowing them to shoot the jet from any angle. They even justified the crane's presence by writing terrorists hiding in an unfinished building into the script.
So then we had a real jet in the real lighting in the real city, and we can get a lot of the shots.
The end result was spectacular. Although the lawyers probably aged a decade convincing the insurance companies it was necessary to put Schwarzenegger in a mock airplane 300 feet in the air. Despite the on-screen chaos, the striptease scene stole the show.
And I, of course, had to do everything in my power not to laugh because the scene was just so hilarious.
There was no choreographer. We didn't talk about it. So when he says dance for me and she starts doing the little, just made me laugh because that's what she would dance.
What seemed like your typical Hollywood cocktail of playful intimacy and laughs had critics accusing Cameron of sexism and misogyny. Roger Ebert even called the scene
basically cruel and not very funny.
We respectfully disagree.
I'm telling you, the biggest laugh I have ever gotten in my life was from that.
Controversy didn't stop there. The portrayal of terrorists sparked outrage. The National Council on Islamic Affairs and the Committee on American-Arab Relations called for a boycott, labeling the film a pile of lies. Cameron's defense? The choice of nation was random, and he could have just as easily used IRA terrorists. Yet Fox was forced to add a disclaimer to the credits. However, after 9/11, Cameron shelved plans for a sequel.
It just wasn't funny anymore. I tried it. We worked on a script for a while. It just wasn't funny. And if you couldn't make it funny, it didn't seem worth it.
Only in 2023 would a True Lies reboot come out, featuring only Tom Arnold from the original cast.
Trust me, it'll go better without me.
Back to 1994. When the film originally hit the big screens, within a few months it grossed nearly $400 million despite protest and mixed reviews.
Like a phoenix rising from the dust of Last Action Hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger is back, stronger than ever. True Lies is true gold, claimed the #1 spot.
Considering True Lies was their last film collaboration, they left on a high note. Schwarzenegger would flex his muscles in movies for another decade before moving into politics, while Cameron would begin working on yet another most expensive film in history. Let's rewind to September 2nd, 1985.
Good evening from CBS News. This is Newsbreak.
You might have been dozing off at the evening news, maybe something about Reagan's tax reform or the latest hurricane scare, but a wide-eyed James Cameron caught a broadcast that set his imagination ablaze. The long-lost wreck of the Titanic had been discovered on the Atlantic seabed.
Scientists who led the team that found the Titanic today released the cream of the crop of thousands of underwater photographs, among them haunting and poignant reminders of life on the great liner as it crossed the ice-cold Atlantic for the first and last time.
That scientist was Dr. Robert Ballard, whose name would soon become synonymous with deep-sea exploration. It turned out Dr. Ballard's original quest for Titanic had a secret prelude, one rooted in Cold War skullduggery. In the 1960s, the U.S. Navy lost 2 nuclear submarines, the Thresher and the Scorpion, under mysterious circumstances. By the 1980s, they needed someone to locate and investigate the wrecks and make sure the Soviets hadn't found them already. Ballard was tapped for the mission, and the official Search for Titanic story was quietly used as cover. Cameron's obsession didn't yet exist in full force, but the seeds were planted during a meeting with Ballard while Cameron was prepping The Abyss.
An American nuclear submarine, the USS Montana, with 156 men aboard, went down about 22 miles from here.
Damn.
Given the plot of the director's deep-sea action film, no wonder he was excited to meet Ballard.
As it turns out, Ballard found the missing subs and completed his mission so quickly that he still had 12 days left to search for Titanic.
But I wasn't interested in Titanic. I was seeing about submersibles and remotely operated vehicles and these deep water robots that they're using. And he still had not sort of gotten over Titanic. He wanted to show me his tapes of how they discovered it and so on, and there was a little infection started. I had the germ, and I didn't know it. It was incubating, you know.
It incubated for over 5 years before finally the idea sparked.
I was just sitting around in between movies. I'd done Terminator II, looking for kind of what to do next, and I just happened upon a tape of A Night to Remember, and I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. And so I popped it in, I sat one afternoon, and I just watched A Night to Remember, and the pieces just fell into place.
And I thought, there's an opportunity here to tell a story with a present-day wraparound that's about exploration and the new technology, and it takes us back in time.
But what's my hook? And then it popped into my head, it's a love story.
Almost as though the universe itself had given him a nudge. That nudge arrived in the form of an IMAX documentary premiere invitation, courtesy of his old pal and Abyss collaborator, Al Giddings.
When I saw that, I realized that these scientific submersibles might be available to make a film, because they had done it for IMAX, which is a documentary, but I thought it's not that much of a greater leap to try to get these people involved in a fictional Hollywood movie.
Without missing a beat, he corralled Al Giddings and demanded an introduction to the Russian team.
He was my underwater DP on The Abyss, and he had introduced me to Robert Ballard and kind of put me down the path of meeting all the Titanic people involved, including the Russians.
So I promptly flew to Moscow and met with the people that had done the IMAX film and said, hey, can I use your subs? And then once they agreed, then it was, now I'm making a film. I guess I better come up with a story.
But how do you pitch a movie like this?
I want to make a 3-hour movie. Yeah. It takes place in 1912. It's a period costume drama. It's a movie about feelings.
Right.
It's going to cost you $100 million plus, and there won't be any stars in it. What do you think, guys?
Hoping to find a hook to justify such a gamble, Cameron dove into Titanic research. One of his key sources was Titanic, an illustrated history. Ken Marshall's paintings in particular electrified his imagination. He marched into 20th Century Fox and flipped Ken Marshall's book open before Peter Chernin.
If you open that book up to the middle, there's a Titanic in the middle stages of its sinking, beautifully lit, lifeboats leaving, rockets going off, illuminating the night sky. And I put it in front of him and I said, Romeo and Juliet on that. And he stared at the painting for a little while. I said, yeah, let's do it.
Cameron asked for $80 million, $40 million less than the previous film, so they figured it would be manageable. The biggest shock came next. James asked for $4 million from the potential marketing budget to fund a deep-sea expedition.
I justified it by the fact that we didn't go there for research. Yeah. We went there to shoot part of the film. You know, I've joked many times over the years that I only made this movie because I wanted to go dive to the Titanic wreck.
Expedition preparations began well before anyone set foot on the open sea. Cameron recruited Dr. Anatoly Sigalovich, the mastermind behind the Mir submersibles, and assembled a team of Russian specialists from Kaliningrad.
And I would like to wish you the happiness and to all of us success in this not-so-easy expedition. Thank you very much.
They rented the research vessel Academic Mstislav Keldysh, home to the Mir 1 and Mir 2, some of the most advanced subs in the world.
Well, it was a mission. You know, it was a mission to go and shoot film in one of the most extreme environments that I think motion picture film has ever been shot in.
Over 28 days, Cameron made 12 dives down to the Titanic itself, discovering shockingly well-preserved sections of the bow, wooden panel cabins, and piles of furniture swept aside by the current. Filming in near total darkness and sub-freezing waters brought unexpected emotions.
It's very black, freezing cold. It's as sterile and barren as the moon. It's almost like having gone to another planet. But yet here's this historical object there, you know, so there's a surrealism almost to that. Oh, there's the first class entrance. There's the window to the captain's quarters. There's the davit for boat number 1. The human face of the drama is superimposable on what you're seeing through the viewport. And so you come away with it with an umbilical to the event that I don't think I would have had going through endless books and research. And we took the robot inside the ship and we looked around and you could see the ROV, the little orange robot that you see in the film. We actually took it inside. We didn't intend on doing that, but we did it. And you can see the ghostly grandeur still there. And no one had photographed that. So that was very exciting, but also emotionally overwhelming. And it's hard to exactly say what the emotional impact of that is, other than the fact that the film is the result of that.
Returning to Los Angeles with authentic footage in hand, Cameron assured 20th Century Fox he was ready to craft a full-length feature and started working on the screenplay.
I have set pieces that I want to see visually, and those kind of exist in a little pile, but not necessarily in any kind of order, and I don't know how to get there. And then I start working forward from character. You know, what's their backstory? What do they care about? How do they meet? What's intriguing about each other? And so on. I write forward, and then I try to weave it through those bits of visual backdrop that I wanted to see. And it all, you know, fell into place fairly well.
He dove into testimony, photos, and engineering analysis to reconstruct the ship's breakup more thoroughly than the classic Night to Remember had done.
I really felt that it was a mission and a responsibility to get it right. So we spent a lot of time on the kind of forensic analysis to kind of figure out what was happening during the flooding and the breakup of the ship.
At the same time, Cameron and Landau scoured the globe for a place to build the Colossal set. Malta, Sweden, Poland, the Caribbean, Australia, even a submarine factory in Southern California. Cameron considered them all, hoping to find a site that could handle the vast tank required for filming Titanic's epic sinking.
I wanted that beautiful lambent light that you get late in the day during magic hour in an English summer, that sort of thing, except I wanted it at sea. Well, how the hell are you going to do that?
He even toyed with constructing an upper section of the ship in Gdansk and sailing it around the Baltic under the glow of Ingmar Bergman-esque sunset. But the logistics were daunting. Building an ocean tank on the far side of the globe made little sense. Instead, the search turned to Rosarito Beach, just 30 minutes south of the U.S. border in Mexico. Labor costs were cheaper, Los Angeles was within driving distance, and the sheer size of the location allowed for a massive backlot, the likes of which hadn't been seen since Hollywood's golden age.
We could build our sets down there, we could assemble them right across the border, we could bring our keys and our actors down from LA, it wouldn't require plane flights, we just drive. I could drive back and forth to my house in Malibu, which I did. It's kind of a crazy idea, but it worked beautifully.
Fox's plan to build permanent beachfront tanks and sound stages in Rosarito wasn't simply about creating a giant sandbox for one movie. It was also a long-term investment that might, they hoped, recoup at least some of the lavish spending. Cameron, meanwhile, had haunting memories of power plant struggles on the abyss. If building tanks from scratch spared him that headache again, well, that was a perk too. So in spring 1996, an army of workers descended on a seemingly unremarkable beach just south of Tijuana.
Welcome to the Baja Studios. It's with a special thrill that I'm able to say those words, since it was only a few months ago that this studio was nothing more than an idea.
Within 100 days, they built 5 sound stages, including the tallest sound stage in the world, the largest indoor filming tank, the largest outdoor tank, and entire neighborhoods for dressing rooms, offices, and craft workshops. Meanwhile, Cameron still needed to find his perfect couple. He was determined that the film would be powered by chemistry rather than star power. The first quest, finding the unforgettable Rose. Cameron enlisted casting director Molly Finn, whose instincts had already delivered Edward Furlong in T2. At first, Finn's suggestion for Rose raised an eyebrow. Kate Winslet?
We almost didn't cast her. She had done so many period parts that it seemed kind of like lazy casting to me to cast Kate because, she was also already known as Corset Kate. And, I wanted to have, in a sense, a more creative casting solution. But I just couldn't resist her. I just thought she was fabulous.
Her screen test was tragic yet tender, a perfect cocktail of vulnerability and inner strength.
Yes, Mr. Dawson.
Here at this screen test, she auditioned with Jeremy Sisto.
God, that thing.
The guy was one step away from becoming the Jack Dawson. Another pretty face who almost got the role was Matthew McConaughey. All right.
The audition went really well. Well enough for when I left, I was being glad-handed and slapped on the back like, this is what we were looking for. Well enough where you get outside, you call your agent and go, oh, I nailed it.
Yet Cameron wasn't satisfied. He needed a Jack who could embody the rebellious spirit of youth without turning into a walking action poster. While the studio pushed for big names like Pitt or Cruise, his search led him to Leonardo DiCaprio, a young actor who at first didn't quite fit the stereotypical mold. DiCaprio had spent his career playing troubled, introspective characters, and his potential as romantic lead was yet to be discovered. Additionally, convincing Leo wasn't as simple as handing him a script and a handshake. Fresh from Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, DiCaprio was wary of another romance role, a part that might typecast him as just another love-struck teen. His agent even demanded a $4 million fee.
Leo is a guy who, fortunately, understands his gift well enough to be able to go to the hardest thing he can find. So he's a lot like me in that sense. He looks for the challenge. And he didn't want to make this picture.
I don't really like sort of these gigantic, huge films for some reason. They seem to be a lot more about the special effects and less about actually a story with content,
I think he thought it was going to be kind of a square-jawed action hero, which of course he's not. He's a very complex character, but he's also very pure of heart, so he wasn't finding the handles as an actor. It took me 3 months to convince him that it was very, very hard to do what he ultimately wound up doing.
Cameron insisted that Jack is a character who in the past would have been played by Jimmy Stewart or Gary Cooper, actors capable of making an ordinary man so compelling that he dominated the screen.
I saw that in a Nickelodeon once and I always wanted to do it.
He told Leo that this would be the most challenging role of his career.
Almost.
In the end, DiCaprio was sold on the vision, and the studio agreed on a fee of $2.5 million. Interestingly, Winslet earned only $1 million. Cameron had stubbornly maintained that the only diva on his set would be Titanic itself, not the actors. Yet, in a delicious stroke of irony that could have only come from Hollywood, neither of his humble, unstarry leads stayed humble or unstarry for long. As filming began, Romeo and Juliet catapulted Leo to near-cult status. And Kate, who Cameron had been reluctant to cast due to her extensive period drama background, was nominated for an Academy Award for her performance in a period piece.
If there was any true impropriety in my behavior, I should be sensible of it, Helena.
For the role of Cal Hockley, James zeroed in on Billy Zane. already a veteran of film and TV, though not yet a household name.
Horrible, isn't it?
Zane initially balked at playing yet another villain, insisting that he was tired of being the generic bad guy. Cameron, having none of it, twisted his arm until he said yes. Zane's smug, aristocratic performance was so memorably hiss-worthy that even he had to admit that playing villains could be fun.
What could possibly be funny?
While Zane was frequently cast as the villain, Frances Fisher emerged as Hollywood's quintessential screen mom. She showed up for her Titanic audition in full English lady mode. And immediately got the part of Ruth DeWitt Bukater, mother to Rose and champion of strict etiquette. But not all supporting roles were fictional. The stoic Captain Edward John Smith, a very real figure, demanded dignified gravitas. Reportedly, Robert De Niro was suggested early on, but fate intervened when he was hospitalized. In stepped Bernard Hill, who outclassed 40 other contenders. Casting director Mary Finn recalled that as soon as Hill donned a captain's cap and glowered, it was like Smith himself had marched into the room.
He was an interesting actor to work with because I always felt like he wasn't doing enough. And then I'd watch the dailies and I'd realize it was all there. It was in his eyes somehow.
The same kind of magic happened with Thomas Andrews, the Titanic's meticulous designer. Victor Garber earned the gig by radiating both intelligence and kindness.
He was a difficult character to cast. I was looking for somebody that had the intelligence that Andrews clearly had. You know, and at the same time, Andrews is known to be a warm, likable guy, and who was a very sympathetic and even heroic figure during the sinking. So I was lucky to find Victor. He was one of the last parts cast.
I'm sorry, but that didn't build you a stronger ship.
For Bruce Ismay, the White Star Line VIP blindsided by his unsinkable dream, Cameron sought an English actor with suitably stiff upper lip vibes. He spotted Jonathan Hind in Jumanji and knew instantly Hyde could embody both pride and mounting panic as the ship's watery fate approached.
But the ship can't sink.
Finally, Cameron's biggest name was Kathy Bates as the unsinkable Molly Brown. For Bates to get her $500,000 fee on the film, Cameron would have to kick in $150,000 of his own.
God, very nice.
Meantime, Rosarito's coastal desert soon transformed into the world's biggest set. The resulting town sprouted sound stages, workshops, and the centerpiece, a ship set nearly 750 feet long, towering 8 stories high, all perched on a tank capable of holding about 17 million gallons of water.
This thing was enormous. I mean, this wasn't some little set. This was massive, 80-story building on its side.
Indoors, work didn't stop either. Designers pored over Cameron's expedition footage and rare archival photos. Historians oversaw every rivet, every White Star Line insignia.
This is actually the dining room. We're going to see this in 2 different situations. The first one is everyone's dolled up very, very nicely in their first-class attire. But then later on, we're actually going to have to tilt this thing and drop it 30 feet into a tank of freezing cold seawater.
Another remarkable set was the Grand Staircase.
We're trying to use real oak, so pretty much we're actually building this as they built it on the Titanic.
I don't know if people realize that we had made it more grand than it really was.
People today are just bigger, and 2 people could hardly pass abreast of each other on either side of this center banister.
So we added about 18 inches either side, and it just eased it out, and it did look great.
After 30 years of studying the ship so intently and painting the ship so many times, 100 times, to see this thing in 3 dimensions and be standing here, I am absolutely speechless.
Still, not every set was built full scale. The first-class lounge, for instance, existed only partly on set.
That's a model, by the way. I promised the studio I was not going to build the first-class lounge, and so we didn't. We built it as a model and did a composite scene, which probably cost more than if we had just built the set, but promise is a promise.
At quarter scale, you can get a lot of realism. We basically relied on our miniature to pick up all the slack. I was really happy that they felt that our miniature was good enough to be used as those kind of backgrounds.
While hundreds of workers toiled away in Rosarito to build Cameron's Titanic sets, the director grabbed a small crew and hopped back aboard the academic Mstislav Keldysh to shoot the modern-day storyline. The ship's captain, Dr. Anatoly Saglovich, even had a cameo in the film. For these scenes, he invited his old-timer Bill Paxton, who took on the role of treasure hunter Brock Lovett.
This better be good.
Paxton was thrilled not just to work with Cameron again, but to bunk on the Keldysh. According to Paxton, the story of the Titanic had me hooked so deeply I couldn't let it go. Indeed, he'd returned for further expeditions with Cameron and Louis Abernathy in the years following the film.
So what happened next?
Abernathy, by the way, wasn't just playing one of Brock's crew. He literally was the guy in real life. Cameron based the character of Louis on him. And when it came time to cast the role, he couldn't find anyone better.
I called him up at his bar that he owns in Texas and said, Louis, you got to play yourself. Can't find anybody to play you. And he said, all right, if you want to fuck up your movie by casting me, you go right ahead.
Next up, Titanic.
All right. Happy hunting, brother man.
Then there was Gloria Stewart, cast as the older Rose, once a Hollywood ingenue in the 1930s.
Thank you.
Stewart had quit acting for decades before coming out of retirement. She was in her 80s, and Cameron's makeup department had to age her even further with prosthetics.
Of course, Gloria had mixed feelings about that, since her big return to the screen after having been retired for 30 years or so was in an age makeup that made her look much older than she really was.
Reflection has changed a bit.
Susie Amos had been cast as Old Rose's granddaughter, a modest role that never launched her to mega stardom. But it did lead her straight to Cameron's heart.
And we just met on this film. We're now happily married and have 4 children.
Before we dive headlong into the actual filming, there's one more crucial piece of the puzzle. Costumes!
What are you planning to wear?
You can't have a proper period epic without oceans of period attire. Enter Deborah Lynn Scott, the costume designer behind E.T. and Back to the Future, who spent a full year with a 50-person team building a wardrobe that could simultaneously survive soaking and sell the glamorous world of 1912.
We made a very concerted effort to find as many authentic pieces as we could. When people go to do a period film, that you're starting from the ground up, you're starting with the corsets and the underwear and the garters and the stockings, and it's a lot of pieces. It's a tremendous accoutrement of accessories. Actors tend to really like that. As they dress themselves, they realize what it felt like to be that person back then.
But let's return to the main shooting location. On a winding road, producer John Landau steers a van parked with visitors. He rounds a bend, and Titanic's towering shell juts from the Rosarito coastline.
They had no idea. They would come over a hill from 2 miles away from the studio, and over the knoll, they would see Titanic there against the water backdrop.
Crews wrestle with the lighting on this colossal set. Standard rigs from Hollywood didn't cut it.
It wasn't just building the set. It was building all the stuff to shoot and light the set. It was adding a layer to it that we hadn't really anticipated, that all the normal Hollywood lighting tools, photography tools, went out the window.
He spotted a tall construction crane on rails meant to hold giant reflectors for naturalistic light. That sparked idea.
He realized that he could hang a camera from under the tower and basically get pseudo-helicopter shots of the entire ship.
The crane, originally built to hoist reflectors and 3 10-kilowatt lamps, became more than a fancy lighting rig. Cameron had a cage welded to the tower's tip, big enough for himself, cinematographer Russell Carpenter, and 2 camera techs. From that perch, he had a full view of the set. Workers trundled the crane along its rails, sweeping past funnel tops and lifeboat davits. Cameron, high above the deck, called out directions through a headset. 2,000 extras gather on the set, crammed into wool coats and straw hats, speaking a mix of English and Spanish. They're recreating Southampton's bustling port on the day Titanic set sail.
We made the decision to only build one side of the ship, and in doing so, we ended up building the starboard side of the ship. It forced us to locate Southampton Dock on that side to shoot the whole sequence, but in fact, in history, it was on the port side.
Let's see, if I have a scene that takes place on the port side, but I only have the starboard hull, then I have to shoot the scene on the starboard side and then turn the film around mirror image later.
This flopping thing, I just haven't been able to get my head around at all. You know, 1 minute my parting's on this side, the next minute, no, we're flopped, so it's on that side.
Where were you standing again? Who was on your right? Okay, well, if they were on your right, they're going to be on your left. And you were holding hands with your right hand, so, and turn your hat around, and it was a nightmare.
If you were there on that day and you looked at the terminal building that said White Star Line, that writing was all backwards.
And it just started to make me laugh when I'd see men with White Star Line written across their hats just backwards. I couldn't quite get my head around it, so I just sort of gave up.
It's just not something you want to do, But we saved millions by not building that other side of the ship.
Next came what the crew casually dubbed the $1 million shot.
If you didn't appreciate the ship, you couldn't appreciate the sinking. So you had to appreciate it in the terms that people felt about it before they knew they were on the Titanic. It both celebrates the ship and it celebrates Jack's character at the same time. It just makes it seem like the idea that you're going to die are so far away and so impossible to conceive. And if you don't start from that place, you'll never understand what it was like to be on that ship.
I'm the king of the world!
Pulling it off demanded every trick in Digital Domain's arsenal. The production team shot DiCaprio and Danny Nucci on a green screen turntable, then morphed them into CG doubles halfway through, and composited them into a 40-foot Titanic miniature, dropped in digital water and digital smoke, digital birds, and digital body doubles for every person in the shot.
I think we spent $1 million on this shot, which of course you could do it for probably 1/10 of that right now. It also took a long time. I remember it taking like 6 months. Still a pretty shot though.
After Cameron showcased Titanic in all its glory, he shifted focus to smaller, more personal moments. One of them took place near the stern, where Rose nearly plunges into the icy water at night.
The scene became the cover set, and it just became a major pain in the neck to recreate this scene over and over and over again whenever the weather got bad. So this scene, which in the film takes place over a few minutes, was shot over several months.
Rehearsals felt like patchwork. Green screen on one side, painted black drops on another, and a black void on the third. Final footage captured over several months showed Kate Winslet suspended on the rail while Leonardo DiCaprio coaxed her down.
See, the whole idea is to engage her without spooking her. Play like it's not even about her. It's like walking up to a horse. You have to do it slow. Oh, absolutely. You know what I mean?
Next, it was the scene which nearly everyone told Cameron to cut.
That's disgusting!
I remember nobody liked it. Kate and Leo didn't like it. The studio didn't like it. Peter Chernin didn't like it. But I liked it. And I think Kate and Leo finally figured out what I was trying to do with it before we shot the scene. I always felt that people have a certain expectation of what a Titanic movie is supposed to be, and I didn't want to be making that movie. I always said, this isn't your dad's Titanic movie. And when he's standing there in front of Rose's mom with a big, goober hanging out of his mouth, it works. The audience is right there, they get it, because everybody has embarrassed themselves against boyfriend or girlfriend's parents in some way, and they get it, they get that social moment. So now you're there, you're in that moment. The time machine has worked to put you on the deck of Titanic.
Winslet later improvised a callback, spitting in Cal's face, surprising Billy Zane and giving the arc a neat bookend. At dinner, further culture clashes erupted. In the end, Leo delivered the perfect final line as an exclamation point.
Time for me to go row with the other slaves.
I had something lame there, like, time to turn back into a pumpkin or something, and he came up with that, which I thought perfectly expressed the kind of class difference.
The kiss scene had the opposite mood, a hushed, romantic promise in the golden hour. It was shot in multiple pieces with various backgrounds and relied on many visual effects. Right after the kiss comes the drawing scene, one of the most intimate moments in the film, but oddly enough, it was shot early on.
This was like one of our first couple days of shooting. One of the very first things that Kate Winslet and Leonardo had to do was, get naked.
Kate and Leo barely knew each other, and James used that tension to his advantage.
Over on the bed, the couch.
Leo's slip was a genuine accident. Cameron liked its awkward honesty and kept it in. As for the artwork,
and I was hoping that Leo might be able to do a few lines off the drawing, but as great an artist as he is as an actor, it turned out that he didn't have a whole lot of talent for drawing, so this is my hand here.
Being a lefty, he had to film his own hand drawing, then flip the image, much like Southampton's scene on a miniature scale. For actual drawing, Cameron had snapped a few photos of Kate wearing a bikini, then filled in details from his imagination. All the other Jack Dawson drawings in the movie also came from Cameron's pencil, many done in post-production. In that sense, the director was channeling a bit of himself through Jack's character, even made a cameo as a most talented part of Jack's body.
And somehow my 41-year-old hand at the time, nobody seems to question that it's his 19-year-old hand.
Now, since we're following the established storyline, let's follow the main characters into the boiler room.
Hold up! What are you two doing down here?
This set piece could have burned through a huge chunk of the budget if Martin Lang and Peter Lamont hadn't employed that old trick with mirrors.
We only built 2.5 boilers and then stuck a mirror on the end. So you were able to look into the mirror and it looked as if the boilers repeated all the way down through the ship. It was a fun bit of movie magic.
Despite all these tricks, most viewers remember the cargo hold instead, specifically the Renault-type CB Town car.
I just couldn't resist the idea of a couple of teenagers wanting to make out in the backseat of a car. Even back in 1912, I'm sure that was going on.
Next, the film shows the collision with the iceberg.
Oh, yes. Here, look at this.
So I guess what we're saying here is that Titanic sunk because of their kiss.
Well, let's not blame the lovebirds for the fate of an unsinkable ship. Instead, let's examine how that scene was shot. To simulate the interaction between the main characters and the iceberg, the team dumped a load of ice on deck while using a motion control camera and a large green screen behind the set. Then they filmed a miniature iceberg with the same camera move on a motion control stage, using interactive lighting from the ship's windows. And all those components were composited together into the final shot. Now let's skip ahead to one of the film's most suspenseful moments. Jack is handcuffed to a pipe. Later, as water rushes in, Rose, wielding an axe, busts him out. This sequence was shot very early in production, basically in week 1, because Cameron needed something to shoot while the giant exterior set, as well as the interior set on hydraulic lifts, weren't ready. They improvised by building a small angled set inside a steel tank so it could be flooded from all sides. The heroic barbarian Rose, wielding her axe, was filmed during these early days, while her entire journey to find Jack was shot later, after the main interior sets were completed.
I love this shot of her running with the axe. It's just so far from the way her character is first introduced, getting out of the car with the purple hat, and here she is.
No acting was required for the icy plunge because they pumped in frigid ocean water with no heating.
I remember it being really cold. I operated this shot. I was wearing a wetsuit and hand-holding the camera, and I was petrified that I was going to drop the whole camera in the water.
I don't think, Jim, I ever really saw Leo and I doing all this stuff. I think I saw kind of little cartoon figures or something, and I don't know what I imagined really, but nothing could have prepared me for what it really was, because some of it was very, very tough, but incredibly exhilarating at the same time.
And was Leo, is the right word, a crutch? I mean, did the pair of you kind of like shoulder...
Oh, he complained about the cold water all the time.
A lot of the water stuff has been really rough just because I'm really temperature sensitive.
And I was just, oh, come on, don't be such a wuss.
Oh, shit, this is cool.
Let's move to the dining room. The dining room was built on a massive rotating platform measuring over 7,500 square feet, set inside a giant concrete reservoir about 16 feet deep. Motors at the base tilted the platform so one side went fully underwater.
So on one set, on the interior stage set, we had the dining room and at least several stories of the grand staircase. It was huge interior structure. And the thing about that was amazing, that as all the tables went underwater, all of the china lifted off because it was all set for breakfast service. These bowls and cups floated, and they kind of tinkled together as the current swirled as the water came in, and it turned into this almost giant ghostly wind chime kind of sound. It was very eerie, and it was just amazing to think that's what really happened.
Imagine how challenging it was, like filling a bowl with cereal and milk, then draining the milk, drying every piece, and putting them back exactly where they belong. And they did that 6 times.
So put it back to the starting level.
Reset, please.
The staircase flood was even more demanding. The scene was filmed in 2 steps. First, the crew flooded the stairwell. Then captured a massive waterfall bursting through the illuminated ceiling dome. 3 cargo containers, each holding over 47,500 gallons of water, were placed above the set. They were opened simultaneously, causing the water to break through the glass and pour down the staircase, carrying stunt performers with it. Despite these massive set pieces, the production still found corners to cut. The first-class lounge, for instance, was designed level for early scenes, and when it needed to look tilted in later shots with Victor Garber, they simply angled the camera and instructed the actors to lean. Wine and shot glasses were molded as solid gel pieces, intentionally pre-angled to appear leaning, and the crew removed them from the mantelpiece to sell the illusion. The production team eventually turned its focus to filming the most intense moments of the story, the actual sinking of the ship.
We had to rebuild the entire set at an angle after we had finished shooting the ship level.
To accomplish this, the sinking liner consisted of two main sections, a movable bow and a stationary stern. The massive tank holding these pieces contained around 63,000 tons of ocean water.
To show the ship actually sinking, we had to adjust the ship to a 6-degree angle. We then disconnect the front 180 feet of the ship and put it on hydraulic cables that will raise and lower it. You will actually see the front section of the ship on camera go underwater as the water pours up on actors.
So this shows you how big the set was. This is all real.
And background and action!
Once the ship reached its final moments on screen, production followed suit with the most chaotic and dangerous scenes. Mass jumps, rapid slides, and a stern rising to near vertical. The jump sequence alone involved 40 people leaping off the ship in one shot. Contrary to how it looks, there was only a narrow stretch of water about 3 feet deep, extending roughly 20 feet from the vessel's side. The rest of the tank was too shallow for safe landings. Floating dummies with life jackets or rubber deck chairs marked areas where stunt performers could aim. Some jumped from the equivalent of a 5-story building, requiring precise coordination to avoid serious injury. Miraculously, only a handful of bruises were reported. Another intense challenge was sliding on the deck. The set itself spanned over 400 feet, but the ship's actual tilt remained at a mere 6 degrees. Much of the apparent steepness was an illusion created by rolling the camera.
We had to make it look as though people were at a 45-degree angle and sliding down the deck. And we'd made these very small sleds with casters on. Once the cable pulled you, and it would pull you very, very fast, it would release. But then you could actually spin 360 degrees. It actually worked very well.
The next major feat was the stern sequence, which combined large-scale practical effects with cutting-edge digital work.
The ship going to vertical was one of the greater challenges. We decided to build a giant teeter-totter of the stern of the ship. It would be at level, but then it could go up to 90 degrees. I remember the first night, if we got it to 90 degrees, we had a cable that we needed to bring it back down. And the first night we were filming, that cable broke. Now, as a producer, I thought it'd be really smart to have my wife and 8-year-old son on there to show to everybody I thought it was safe. And there they were stuck there for several hours.
Falling stunts required a mix of real actors and stunt people, plus carefully placed foam or rubber elements. Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet performed from 80 feet in the air.
I feel like I'm on top of the world.
Hey, Jack, I feel like I'm flying.
By the time Titanic lumbered into its third act of production, Cameron was juggling daily costs of about $1 to $2 million. At this point, you might guess that the original $110 million budget was, to put it gently, inadequate.
We have lots of money left over. Everything's going like butter. Everything's as smooth as can be.
And with every delay, miscalculation, and deep-sea-sized idea, that shortfall only grew more alarming.
This is bad.
If money burned like fuel, they certainly wouldn't have burned through it as quickly as they did on this picture.
I've never been on a job where everything just went like clockwork like that.
It's amazing, right?
It is startling.
Meanwhile, as the schedule kept slipping, the press bombarded the director and studio with mocking headlines, practically taking bets on which day the budget would fully implode.
We were the biggest idiots in the history of Hollywood, and we were going to go down in flames like nobody'd seen. And this is going on while we're trying to finish the film. We're struggling with being over budget on visual effects, trying to make our deadline, and Variety is running Titanic Watch, this little column on the front page of Variety every single day.
Oh, not to worry.
Fox was sweating bullets. Paramount had capped its exposure at $65 million, so every overrun fell back on Fox's plate.
And Fox doesn't want the money back, you know? They've already allocated it for the movie there. They don't want any more cash back, so...
Naturally, they tried renegotiating Cameron's contract, asking him to give up not just his box office share, but even half of what he'd make on his next movie.
Great. Doesn't this look great?
Hard to blame them. At the time, most in Hollywood believed they'd never recoup a cent of this colossal sinkhole. Fox's Peter Chernin admitted that
we could have tried to cut $30–40 million out at some point, and what I ultimately felt was that our only hope was to plow full speed ahead and try and make a great movie.
Call it stubbornness or foresight, but they stuck with it. After all, if you're going to gamble on a ship, best bet on the biggest one afloat. Due to delays in building the main set, the actual ending was shot at the beginning of the schedule. Actors were floating in a 4-foot-deep indoor tank with an artificial horizon.
The performers were forced to crouch down to create an illusion that the tank was deeper than the 4 feet that it actually was.
Interestingly, the water in those scenes wasn't very cold. Extras would stay in for several hours, and the cold breath effect was added later.
What we're doing is we're shooting the breath element. The person is behind a black mask, and all we capture is just this delicate breath material going by.
We wound up with whatever 100 shots of digital breath, and nobody knew if it would work or not, so it was a big gamble. But I figured if George Lucas could populate every other shot in Star Wars with a lightsaber or a laser, we could put some digital breath in.
Of course, the biggest mystery that kept fans up at night wasn't about iceberg trajectory or watertight compartments. It was that door. You know the one. Could Jack have squeezed on alongside Rose, or was he doomed to become a popsicle the minute she spread out on that raft? Since the public refused to let it go, Cameron and his crew did what any self-respecting filmmaker would do. They tested it with science.
Now, let's see if he could have lived.
They headed down to Dr. Jim Cotter's lab in New Zealand, accompanied by stunt performers who matched Jack and Rose in age, height, and weight. Then built an exact replica of that famous raft, right down to the freeboard and buoyancy. The results? 20 minutes in frigid, simulated Titanic water, and Jack was already clinically hypothermic. Even when they tried alternate setups, from hugging for warmth to redistributing the raft's buoyancy, there just wasn't enough surface area to keep both afloat without partial submersion. A 2-hour wait for rescue? Not a chance. Cameron, ever the detail man, brought up a real-life case. A Chinese passenger who survived clinging to debris.
We actually shot that scene. My assistant at the time was a guy named Van Ling, and I said, Van, get in the water. So Van got out there and was yelling in Mandarin to be rescued.
In the end, Cameron decided that while Jack might have lived through some miraculous alignment of conditions, it would have meant rolling the dice with Rose's life.
Final verdict, Jack might have lived, but there's a lot of variables. So based on what I know today, I would have made the raft smaller. So there's no doubt.
Once the cameras stopped rolling, the extras packed up, and one of Hollywood's grandest sets was consigned to demolition. The Titanic replica was reduced to scrap metal. Gone.
Pretty cool, huh?
Only the empty foundation pits on Mexico's coast remain as a memorial to the colossal shoot. Meanwhile, Cameron secluded himself in the editing room with longtime collaborators Richard Harris and Conrad Buff. With 1.5 million feet of film to sift through, you might wonder why he didn't invite a few more editors to join the party.
To me, the editing room was my bunker. And I said, I'm not coming out of this bunker until I have a great movie. I figured my career was over. There was no hope of making a dime. And I probably would never get to direct again. But I was going to go down swinging. We were going to make the best possible movie we could.
By May of '97, it was painfully clear the film needed more time. The effects, the score, the dubbing, the final sound mix, everything was lagging. Fox pushed the release date to December 19th, warning Cameron he'd better make good on all that blood, sweat, and mostly salt water. It's no wonder the studio was worried. Given the recent debacles of Waterworld and Heaven's Gate, they wondered if Titanic could do any better. Meanwhile, Cameron was completely run ragged, gaining 30 pounds and losing all sense of the outside world.
Are you burnt out from Titanic?
Totally burnt out.
Yeah.
There's no denying that Cameron's reputation as a dictatorial director reached a fever pitch during Titanic.
Here we are on the bridge of the set of Titanic, and down here there was just quite an altercation. Jim got so upset with a cast member that he turned on his freezing rays and shattered him. But that wasn't enough. He's now scattering the remains all over the forward well deck.
As post-production moved forward and Cameron was pushing every limit, run times, VFX deadlines, even his own sanity, there remained one essential puzzle: the film's music. Ironically, he turned back to James Horner, the very composer he'd clashed with during Aliens. The two had sworn never to work together again, but time has a way of mending fences. After only one meeting, Cameron was convinced Horner was the right man to craft Titanic's score. Horner threw himself into composing what became one of the greatest and most recognizable film scores ever recorded. Its sweeping melodies perfectly underscored the epic tragedy.
I always maintain that the music by itself is less interesting, and the film is less interesting. When they're married together is when the magic sort of happens.
The only hitch was Cameron's insistence on excluding any songs, a point Horner politely ignored. Working in secret with lyricist Will Jennings, he enlisted old friend Celine Dion to record a demo.
I'm listening to this thing. First 2 bars was kind of an eye roll. Oh crap, he's pushing a pop song. Then I started to listen to it, and I really liked the lyrics, and I liked the song. And by the time it finished, I had made my decision. Then he said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "This can be as big as I Will Always Love You from The Bodyguard." And he said, "Well, do you recognize the voice?" And I said, "No, but I don't really know pop singers." He said, "It's Celine Dion." I said, "Oh, well, she's kind of big, right?"
By the time Titanic finally screened for test audiences, everyone in the editing bay knew one thing: this picture was long.
We knew the movie was, at that time, too long, and I always felt that the goal was to get rid of the TOO in front of long.
But to producer John Landau's relief, the only bits the preview crowd thought dragged were the sinking itself. That told them the romance was clicking just fine, and that, at least, was gold. Shortly after, Cameron took the show on the road, first to the Tokyo International Film Festival, then on November 17, 1997, to Kaliningrad for a special screening aboard the academic Mstislav Keldysh, the same research vessel that helped him dive into the wreck. Standing there in front of the real-life explorers, Cameron still figured this flick might end up a financial iceberg.
We still didn't think we were going to make any money, but at least we knew we had a movie that people liked. So we're starting to breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief, at least we didn't look like complete idiots.
When Titanic opened on December 19th, it squeaked into first place by the slimmest margin, grossing barely 1/10 of its colossal budget. The suits behind the scenes were already tallying up their losses when, lo and behold, the second weekend grossed more than the first. And the third weekend soared even higher.
And everybody just stopped. There was just this strange sense of, what? That doesn't happen. That never happens. And then the next weekend, it went up again. So that's when we realized it was this phenomenon. And then the phenomenon just didn't stop.
Over the next several weeks, Titanic kept hitting new milestones. It clung to the #1 spot for 16 straight weeks. An unheard of streak. By mid-February, nearly 2 months into the release, the film notched its single highest grossing day on Valentine's Day, no less. By that point, teenage girls were watching Titanic on a loop, and the worldwide gross sailed past $1.8 billion, completely overshadowing the old record.
Some say its box office will grow so large, it may actually show profits that no accountant can hide.
Critics couldn't help but swoon either.
If you're going to spend $200 million on a movie, this is the way to do it.
After all the publicity and all the delays and all the reports about its world record budget, turns out to be a glorious Hollywood epic, wonderfully well crafted and well worth the wait.
Film was well received in Hollywood because, frankly, people felt guilty because they had treated us so badly. And this was their way of making it up.
No matter the reason, the accolades rolled in.
Live from Los Angeles, California, the 70th Anniversary Academy Awards.
Titanic tied All About Eve with 14 Oscar nominations, walking away with 11 trophies on March 23, 1998.
Deborah L. Scott for Titanic.
Gary Rydstrom, Tom Johnson, Gary Summers, and Mark Ulano for Titanic.
Tom Belfort and Christopher Boyes for Titanic.
Robert Legato, Mark Lassoff, Thomas L. Fisher, and Michael Cantor for Titanic.
James Horner, Titanic.
Conrad Buff, James Cameron, and Richard A. Harris for Titanic.
What a shocker. And the Oscar goes to James Horner and Will Jennings for My Heart Will Go On, Titanic.
Peter Lamont for Titanic.
And set decoration, Michael Ford.
Russell Carpenter for Titanic.
The Oscar goes to James Cameron for Titanic.
And the Oscar goes to Titanic.
This is James Cameron's third Academy Award of the evening, the first for John Landau.
There's no way that I can express to you what I'm feeling right now. My heart is full to bursting, except to say, I'm the king of the world!
Having reached a pinnacle few filmmakers ever see, Cameron then did something unthinkable. He walked away. Instead of immediately leveraging his success on another blockbuster, he pivoted to deep-sea expeditions, an obsession he would nurture for years.
So, of course, as soon as the movie was done, I was immediately planning my next expedition.
You know, initially, I just wanted to talk about the new tech in Avatar and James Cameron's genius. But the deeper I dug, the more this story felt like it was an explanation for why I feel so empty watching giant robots punch space lizards. This is the moment cinema took a wrong turn. Avatar is the signpost, and Hollywood followed it right off a cliff.
The 3D epic Avatar
continues to dominate at the box office. Everyone who's seen Avatar says you have to go see it.
Avatar is apparently not awful.
It's going to change the way movies are made forever.
The new way Hollywood will be making movies.
I think that'll pay big dividends in the future for Hollywood.
James Cameron is just such a mastermind. Now everyone across the country will be able to have 3D at their local theater.
or see their theater go dark forever.
Are you excessively obsessive?
Clinically? Never been diagnosed.
The story starts with James Cameron's obsession with solving engineering problems. In 1995, he directed T2 3D for the Universal Studios theme parks.
The only place on Earth where you can ride the movies.
He loved the idea of 3D, but he despised the actual process of filming it.
The logistics and the technology required were enormous. The cameras were the size of refrigerators.
So he asked Vince Pace, an engineer who'd built underwater cameras for The Abyss, to help him build a better camera. Their first rig was a 450-pound monster made by sticking two huge 65mm cameras together with extra mechanics. To calibrate it, they had to adjust the lenses, distance, and tweak the focus so both cameras worked in sync. It took hours, and getting 3 or 4 good shots in a day felt like a big win. But that monstrous camera proved the concept worked. So Cameron spent the next decade on a personal quest to turn that machine into a usable tool. He used a clever mirror system to get the two lenses as close together as human eyes. Then he replaced film cameras with digital ones.
That's one camera body. And this over here is a separate camera body, each with its own lens.
By ditching heavy film and the motors needed to run it, the rig finally became light enough to actually use on a set. And then he field tested the whole system miles beneath the ocean, filming his documentaries.
You want to see Titanic? Check this out, bro. You're going to love this. It's like, there she is, baby.
So you might be wondering why I gave you that whole backstory. It's because it's the only way to explain why Cameron really decided to shoot Avatar in 3D.
Who gives a shit? What a colossal waste of everyone's time.
If I were to give you the official answer, I'd say it was because of his deep love for the technology, a passion project he poured a decade of his life and $12 million into. But the version without the sugarcoating sounds more like this. He'd poured a decade of his life and $12 million into it. He had built the perfect product, but he had no customers. Avatar was the Super Bowl ad for his camera system. So first he had to convince theaters to show his ad in 3D.
The first time that we actually showed it to a large group of people was Cinema Expo, which is an exhibitors convention in Amsterdam.
In a room full of theater owners and studio executives, he made his pitch.
So I've sort of set this my goal, making movie theater back to the kind of sacred experience that it's always been for me my whole life.
Back in 2009, Hollywood had two problems. The first was pirates, who were raiding movie theaters with camcorders. Remember that cam rip? That shaky, muffled crap was costing them millions. Their second problem was the 2008 financial crash. Suddenly, families had better things to spend their money on than movies.
And what do they cut back on? Baked goods, movies, restaurants, and as a result, the entire economy suffers.
He promised them a weapon that could win the war on two fronts. First, an experience so spectacular it would get audiences off their couches and justify a higher ticket price. And second, a strike against piracy on a scale that would make Cutler Beckett proud.
Cutler Beckett is Lord now, actually.
After all, trying to film a 3D movie with a hidden camcorder is, to put it mildly, a dumb idea.
The enemy has opted for oblivion.
But while it's easy to convince rich people they should make more money, it's much harder to convince the internet of anything.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
When the first trailer dropped, it bombed. And yes, I've been around long enough to remember Landline TV's CGI junkie sketch.
Wow, it looks great.
And it could look even better. For an extra $45 million,
No.
What do you mean, no? I tell you to give me money and you give it to me. That's how this works.
As well as that South Park episode.
Smurfs and I grew to understand each other. They shared with me their art of picking Smurf berries. Of course, it wasn't long before I fell in love with Smurfette. We were from two different worlds, and yet we spoke the common language of passion. But then, a crisis. Clumsy Smurf burst into the Smurf ceremony to say that humans had come to destroy all of Smurfland. No! Of course, since I'm being silenced, I'm not allowed time to show you the entire movie. And so please buy Dances with Smurfs, available now on DVD.
The marketing team's response was a massive gamble called Avatar Day. They organized a free worldwide 16-minute sneak peek, letting the film itself do the talking. And the gamble paid off. Avatar grossed $1 billion in just 19 days.
And the film has broken every box office record there is.
To this day, it's the highest grossing film of all time. And 72% of that money came from premium priced 3D tickets.
Now, every indication is that this trend will continue as audiences appear to be more than willing to shell out a few extra dollars for this total immersion experience that can't be replicated anywhere else.
Early adopters proved that Cameron's formula could sell a movie. Resident Evil Afterlife and Tron Legacy used his fusion rig to deliver exactly what the market wanted. Axes slicing the screen and neon light cycle chases that packed IMAX theaters. Even serious directors began to flirt with the new tool. Martin Scorsese's Hugo won an Oscar for cinematography, and Wim Wenders' Pina became the first 3D film nominated for Best Documentary. The trend reached its peak in 2013 with Gravity. 80% of its opening week gross came from 3D tickets. While filmmakers explored, the engineer cashed in. Cameron's own company, the Cameron Pace Group, was paid by the studio to develop the cameras for Avatar. In the years after the film's release, they earned an estimated $250 million from camera sales, rentals, and patents.
Are all movies going to become 3D in the future?
Yes. Well, not all movies. Not all movies are in color. Still one or two a year that squeaked through.
Sure, 3D took over the market and the studios saw their profits soar, but there were casualties. As I've mentioned, the key innovation was the switch to digital. And no, I'm not about to wax poetic about the artistic value or the magic of film. This came down to money.
A big change is headed our way in the way we watch movies.
Hollywood is moving to all digital formats. It means
This push to go digital could leave many theaters in the dust.
Now, had it been just a few months ago, we'd have watched this movie on this 35mm film. But many of the major film companies are now switching over to these digital projectors.
A digital copy cost around $100 compared to up to $2,000 for a 35mm film print. To upgrade a single screen, however, cost an average of $70,000. So small family-owned theaters were hesitant to take on that kind of debt. But the market pushed, and the big chains upgraded fast. In just 6 years, the US and Canada went from 3,500 3D-ready screens to over 16,000.
The film companies have basically stated, as of 2014, we're not shipping film anymore. It's not going to happen.
This gave theater owners a brutal convert or go dark ultimatum.
Well, one by one, they're disappearing, and with them, something you might have taken for granted for a long time.
Within a year, about a third of all rural theaters and drive-ins had closed or been sold to the larger chains. And the irony? After forcing thousands of theaters into debt, the 3D boom collapsed. The weapon against piracy had a fatal flaw. You could still buy a ticket for the regular screening.
What a twist!
And people got sick of paying extra for murky movies that made their heads hurt and were often lazily converted to 3D in post-production. The experience you can't get at home was an experience nobody wanted.
What'd you think of the 3D?
I think it could have did without the 3D because it was dark in a lot of places, so we had to take the glasses on and off to kind of see some things that was actually happening. So
by 2017, even the CEO of IMAX announced that they would be cutting 3D screenings to prioritize regular films.
What did we learn, Palmer?
I don't know, sir.
I don't fucking know either. I guess we learned not to do it again.
This seems like a good place to end the story, but the truth is, 3D is only a fraction of it. The real changes Cameron made were to the very idea of how a blockbuster is built. I'm watching Alien. The film is almost 50 years old, but that chest-burster scene still sends shivers down my spine. Ridley Scott doesn't boast about the shot. Quick cuts hide its flaws. I know it's a puppet under the table, but it works. Ridley didn't warn the actors, so their shock is real, which makes my shock real. Spielberg, with a broken shark, made a horror movie that emptied the beaches. The shark barely appears, so he had to find other ways to terrify us. And ironically, the man who best understood the power of these limitations was James Cameron.
Cut. Try it again.
Practical effects are a battle against chaos, a fight against time, budget, against materials that break, against the one perfect take you can never repeat. And Cameron was the king of that chaos.
I mean, he wants to do basically everything because he has such a clear vision. And see him ending up running with the smoke machine and putting on blood and trying to do your makeup. That's why people always say that a Jim Cameron movie has a certain look.
He built a 600-pound animatronic alien queen and made you believe in it. He shot the abyss literally underwater. And I still rewatch Terminator 2 because Stan Winston hid the CGI behind dozens of puppets and animatronics. But there was one mistake Cameron couldn't fix. It happened on the Titanic's deck, and it reveals everything about the future he was about to build.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day has just become the biggest money spinner of all time.
30 years ago, after T2, Cameron saw the future, and he was frustrated. The liquid metal T1000 was a work of art, but each shot was built by hand, like a custom car. ILM artists spent 10 months on just 42 shots, and it cost about $5 million. It looked great, but it wasn't an assembly line. And Cameron doesn't build custom cars. he builds factories.
That's the worst metaphor ever.
But how do you build one when you don't have the tools? Inventions don't just pop up. They need real projects to test and improve them. That's exactly how Photoshop was born, as a tool to work with digital backgrounds in the abyss water tentacle scene.
Damn rat's breathing that shit.
So in 1995, Cameron wrote the most visually demanding script ever. He called it Avatar. It's set on a far-off moon filled with tall blue people. Normally, to make a world like that, you'd use animation, but Cameron didn't want cartoons. He wanted his digital characters to move just like real actors. To do that, he needed motion capture. Here's how it works. An actor wears a suit covered in little dots. When the actor moves, a computer tracks those dots and makes a simple stick figure skeleton. Then you slip a digital skin over that skeleton and boom, you get a CGI character that moves exactly like the actor. So Cameron's big idea was to fill a whole movie with those stick figure skeletons under photorealistic CGI skin.
I figured if we could do that, we could do anything. And of course, the answer that I got was, we can't do this. Nobody can do this.
So Cameron put the plan on hold and made Titanic instead, where the primitive motion capture used for digital extras was a constant reminder of how far the technology still had to go.
But I knew CG wasn't going to stop advancing. All the other companies were going to continue to push, and all the other directors were going to continue to push those companies. So I knew it was only a matter of time.
Eventually, someone else would invent the secret ingredient he was missing. So Cameron did the smartest thing he could. He waited.
You know, everybody was going off in these different directions, creating these different variants on the theme of these performance capture technologies.
And action.
First, George Lucas gave it a shot in The Phantom Menace. He put Ahmed Best in a mocap suit on set to create Jar Jar Binks.
I watched the film 18 times in its first couple of years over all in theaters. I remember at one, a guy ran down the aisle toward the screen screaming, "It's God, it's God." Yeah. And he meant it in that moment.
Don't do that again.
But the technology was too rough. Animators still had to keyframe almost every move by hand. So Jar Jar ended up looking like, well, you've seen it. It's self-explanatory, even to Yusa Misa Wisa. The problem looked unsolvable until 2002. For the first time, a digital character really felt alive. It seemed performance capture had arrived, but it was still a trick.
Not listening. I'm not listening.
While Andy Serkis's body drove Gollum's movements, his face was just a reference. Animators recreated his expressions by hand.
And so you had the most important part of his performance, which was sort of what you see and hear, was really entirely up to the animation team.
When I saw what Peter Jackson did with the Lord of the Rings films with Gollum, I said, okay, you can do a character. Now let's see what it's going to take to do multiple characters and to generate a big pipeline that's going to be able to do literally thousands of shots.
Like T2, it was a custom car, but Cameron needed more. More arrived 2 years later. Hidden in an express that took a detour from the uncanny valley straight to the uncanny capital. And if you're that one guy that doesn't know what the uncanny valley is, it's that skin-crawling feeling you get when something looks almost real, but isn't. Yeah, Polar Express is the only kids movie where the kids look like they're wearing other kids' faces. But inside those creepy children was Tom Hanks. Damn, that did sound better in my head.
If I were you, I would think about climbing on board.
Long story short, Zemeckis used the best motion capture technology in the world for his Christmas Story. They mapped every muscle Hanks owns, then pasted that data on digital 6-year-olds. That still sounds creepy. The result was awful, but Cameron saw past it and found his secret ingredient. It was a small team of engineers. They were in business from 1999. They built a rig for Gollum and they perfected it for the Polar Express. And jokes aside, it was an engineering marvel. Zemeckis recorded his actors in a bare room, and then, long after they'd gone, he filmed them with a virtual camera.
I could have a human camera operator actually operate the virtual camera, so it had a much more realistic and traditional movie cinema feeling.
It was the exact process Cameron wanted for Avatar, with a few tweaks.
Which is what exactly?
First, Cameron went to Fox and asked for
$10 million to prove we can make this movie. And they said, basically, are you nuts? I said, look, it's either that or you're going to greenlight a $200 million movie and not know whether we can do it or not. So what would you prefer? They said, here's $10 million.
Then he hired Giant Studios to start building his factory. And to jump ahead for a sec, once Avatar proved the system worked, Cameron bought Giant Studios. The patents, the software, the engineers, he absorbed it all. And if you want a lame analogy, Cameron was Gollum, and he had finally gotten his precious. So now that he had his team, let's take a look at what he actually built.
Hell, it's about time.
This is the volume. Here's where all the wizardry happens. Over 100 infrared cameras hanging all around the soundstage. They're tracking the reflective dots on each suit down to the millimeter, no matter how many actors or horses are in a scene. Yeah, there were horses.
Is that BoJack Horseman?
Oh, geez, here we go.
Over here, you've got a row of computers. Let's call it the nerd corner. This is where all the data from the sensors is transformed into a low-resolution, real-time render of the CGI world. Think of it as a video game. Cameron played it through the virtual camera, which was basically a TV screen with handles. He could walk through the empty room, but on his screen, he was walking inside the jungles of Pandora, aiming his camera at digital characters. But there are also a dozen real cameras filming every possible angle. This footage is edited on the same day to create a rough cut of the scene, which becomes a guide for the animators later. And yes, all this tech still couldn't replace animators entirely. Because at the end of the day, no actor on Earth knows how to flick their tail. But the digital world was built on a physical foundation. The volume was a high-tech jungle gym of skeletal frames, rigs, and structures. To capture the strain of climbing a floating mountain, the crew built specific handholds and ledges for the performers to touch. Smaller setups were used to imitate the terrain, and the complex rigs were used to create a convincing flying experience. All of this forced the actors' bodies to move with true weight and effort. But who were the actors? I'm not talking about the stars. Sure, we all know the stories. Matt Damon effed up.
Jim Cameron called me. He offered me 10% of Avatar.
Sam Worthington slept in his car before his audition.
You found him in a car, right?
He was living in a car when I cast him.
Lang being pulled from Cameron's memory from an old Aliens audition.
Back in 1985 as a young actor. And I remembered him from then.
My name is Stephen Lang. And I'm in the movie.
And Zoe Saldana became the sci-fi queen of a generation in just a few years.
I know who you are. Anyone knows who you are.
Yeah, who's this Zoe chick? I mean, never heard of her really.
Ow! I'm sensitive! Jesus!
Now, the actors who were truly interesting are the ones you've never seen. Like this fella right here.
I am part of the troupe. We fill in the many different crazy things that these projects call for.
Meet the troupe. Cameron's own personal army of dancers, stunt performers, and acrobats. Their work began long before the main cast ever put on a mocap suit. They were the factory's research and development division, building a test run of the entire movie with Cameron, refining every action and blocking every scene. The troupe also played nearly every small role in the film. The same guy could be repurposed as dozens of different background characters and extras. And if Cameron needed a large crowd, he could film the same 20 troupe members from different angles, then use a kind of copy-paste button to turn them into an army of hundreds.
I
would say there probably isn't a single scene in the movie that I have not done something in, whether it's doubling or playing a character or doing something at some point.
But the troupe's biggest impact on the industry was something you never saw. Remember the action-packed Arnie sequences in T2? If you pay attention, you can spot this guy in most of the scenes. Hiding the double forced editors to use tricks, faster cuts, quick close-ups, and wide shots from the back. But performance capture let Cameron digitally stitch a stuntman's body to an actor's face, creating a seamless shot. Of course, they don't like to talk about this in the behind-the-scenes videos. It ruins the whole mantra about preserving the actor's pure performance.
Every nuance, every tiny bit of the performance that you see on the screen was created by the actors.
Right.
Speaking of faces, how did they solve the dead eyes problem? Previously, mocap used markers on an actor's face, but that doesn't capture much detail.
You can't glue markers onto somebody's eyeballs, so how are you going to know how their eyes are moving around? Now you're making that up.
So we came up with this idea that we would actually have a little boom, and on the end of that boom there'd be a little tiny camera, and it would image the face while the actor was working. So it captured every nuance of how their lips moved and how all their facial muscles moved, how their eyes moved.
So Cameron had his tools. He built his factory, and yes, I know what you're probably thinking. What does any of this have to do with that mistake on the Titanic deck? Patience. We're getting there.
Don't worry about it. I couldn't care less.
The cost of this thing was enormous. For Avatar's budget, you could have shot 2 Titanics colliding. So with that much money on the line, what kind of world do you build? You build the one that sells.
That's the only reason. It's what pays for the whole party.
And if you ask me, how alien did they get? My answer is not very. Now, don't get me wrong, Pandora is amazing. It's the ultimate vacation spot, the floating mountains, straight from the national park in China. The glowing forest inspired by caves in New Zealand. The jungles are from Hawaii and the Amazon. You see where this is going, right? A familiar landscape is an emotional shortcut. It gives you awe without the hard work of understanding something new. A truly alien world was a risk they weren't willing to take. He's selling you a ticket to a vacation you can't afford. It's a trick so overused in modern movies it's almost funny.
They like to get the landmarks.
Every Mission Impossible plot is just an excuse to wreck the most popular tourist spots on Earth. And the poor streets of Italy, how many times can they get demolished in the name of good versus evil? But it didn't stop with the landscape. The creatures followed the same formula. A horse with 6 legs, a panther with 6 legs, a whale with, well, it's just a whale, I suppose.
Oh, come on, that's not a...
And finally, the Na'vi themselves. Cameron knew the film's success depended on its love story, and a love story only works if the audience finds the characters attractive. So the Na'vi couldn't look too strange.
We initially started out with kind of more amphibian-like and reptilian kind of forms, antennae and things like that. And we kept realizing that it wouldn't work as a love story to see them not be attractive. And then they kept coming back to just blue-skinned humans.
No, I'm afraid I just blew myself.
So we have to find ways of pushing away from human, but in a way that people would not find off-putting, and in fact might even find to be kind of quite beautiful. I wanted people to say, I want to be one of them.
I am a living god.
And it worked. The world he built was so seductive that when the movie came out, thousands of fans genuinely mourned that Pandora wasn't real.
There's controversy that's surrounding the movie. They're calling it Avatar Blues.
Yes, diehard fans of Avatar are depressed.
They get attached to this world of Pandora, the fantasy world, and they can't deal with reality afterwards.
They see this movie, and especially if they see it in 3D, they're really feeling it, and then their world is not this, so that's what's leading to the depression.
More than 1,000 comments have been posted on a fan forum website thread titled Ways to Cope with the Depression of the Dream of Pandora.
I think you might need some other things in
your life if you're no.
But I will say, when you're sitting there watching the movie, you want to go there, at least on vacation.
But let me be clear, I'm not saying Avatar is a bad movie. As a piece of pure technical craft, it's incredible. Cameron created what he himself called
the best possible cinema experience.
But here's the thing. The process Cameron used was one-of-a-kind, mad genius process. And no one in Hollywood saw the years of hard work behind it. All they saw was a new trend that said every problem can be solved in post-production. A director just has to tell the computer guys to press an effects button, and bang, the movie is done. But this new trend had consequences. First, a strange weightlessness. With no limits, the laws of physics became a suggestion. Action scenes felt hollow. Remember the final battle in Black Panther? Yeah. Or how Fast and Furious became a cartoon on coke? You couldn't care less about these scenes, but at least you've got family.
Family.
It infected even the camera. As the Dark Knight DP Wally Pfister said about the Avengers, the camera work was illogical, designed not to tell a story, but to show off a digital set. This revealed a shift in thinking. The old goal was to hide the effect, to blend it seamlessly into reality. The new goal was to brag about the render, to move the camera in impossible ways simply because you can. It's the difference between dressing with taste and wearing expensive clothes just to show you have them. Special effects used to be like finding an onion ring in your order of French fries. Now, Hollywood just serves you a whole soggy plate of onion rings for dinner. We now live in a world without limits, and without these limits, everything feels lifeless. Think about how that affected actors on those bare-bones sets.
Here we go.
At least Cameron took his whole cast on a trip to give them a feel for how it was supposed to look.
It was just the kind of kinesthetic sense memory that allowed them to create. What did it smell like? What did it feel like? What did the trail feel like under your feet?
on my tail.
While Hollywood raced to abandon the real world, Cameron did the opposite. For the sequel, his team tried to convince him to fake the underwater scenes, to hang the actors on wires. Cameron refused.
Just doesn't work. It looks phony. And it also is distracting from performance and so on, and you're not getting the real water physics.
So to capture the feeling of being underwater, he built a massive water tank inside a hangar. He built a real mini ocean to make his fake one look believable. His goal was never to escape reality. It was never about what he can bring to the filmmaking process. It was about what he could remove. For years, his true enemy was chaos. Chaos is the bad weather that ruins a shot, the light that takes 20 minutes to move, or the perfect sunset that's gone in 5. Which brings us back to the deck of the Titanic, back to that fleeting sunset. He had 2 takes to film that iconic kiss. One of them was out of focus, and that's the one in the movie.
Oh my God, who the hell cares?
The volume, the virtual camera, performance capture, it was all an elaborate multi-million-dollar engineering project to ensure he would never again be at the mercy of a single imperfect moment.
And action.
He built a factory designed to manufacture perfection.
Perfect experience. Perfect in the photography, perfect in the post-production, perfect in the CG. And we really jumped through a lot of hoops to deliver that experience to the audience.
But a roller coaster is a thrill on your birthday. Ride it every Friday, and you just feel sick. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, share, follow, ring the bell, all of those good things, and we appreciate you very much.